Humans have an innate curiosity to understand and solve puzzles. Unsolved mysteries offer a tantalizing challenge, and people are often drawn to them in an effort to solve the mystery and satisfy their curiosity. People are often fascinated by the unknown and unexplained. Unsolved mysteries represent a glimpse into a world of uncertainty and intrigue. The mystery of the Nemi ships. The Nemi ships were two ancient Roman ships that were discovered in Lake Nemi, near Rome, in the early 20th century. The larger of the two ships was over 70 meters long and was considered one of the largest ancient ships ever built. The Nemi ships were built by the Roman Emperor Caligula in the 1st century AD as floating palaces for his personal use. They were incredibly luxurious and had features such as heated baths, mosaic floors, and marble columns. The Nemi ships had heating systems. They were built with hypocausts, which were a type of underfloor heating system used in ancient Roman times. The hypocausts consisted of a series of channels and flues beneath the floors of the ships, which allowed hot air to circulate and warm the rooms. In addition to the hypocausts, the Nemi ships also had other heating features, such as furnaces and boilers, which were used to heat water for the baths and to provide heat for other areas of the ships. The heating systems of the Nemi ships were an impressive feat of engineering for their time, and they demonstrate the advanced technological capabilities of the ancient Romans. After Caligula's passing, the Nemi ships were scuttled in the lake and remained underwater for almost 2,000 years until they were discovered in the 1920s. The Italian government raised the ships from the lake in the 1930s and put them on display in a museum built specifically for them. Unfortunately, both of the Nemi ships were destroyed during World War II, and today only a few fragments remain. However, the story of the Nemi ships has captured the imagination of historians and the public alike, and they remain a fascinating example of ancient Roman engineering and extravagance. The Nemi ships are an example of brilliant engineering for their time. The ancient Romans were skilled shipbuilders and engineers, and the Nemi ships were a testament to their expertise. The Nemi ships were some of the largest and most elaborate ships of their time, and they were built with a high degree of craftsmanship and attention to detail. They were also designed to be functional, with features like the hypocaust heating systems and other amenities that made them comfortable and livable for their occupants. The fact that the Nemi ships were scuttled and sunk in Lake Nemi and yet remained preserved for almost 2,000 years is a testament to their durability and the quality of their construction. The mystery here is that the ship's discovery proved that the ancient Romans were capable of building large ships. Historians, scholars, and researchers often ridiculed the idea that the Romans were capable of building such a large ship, but due to the Nemi ship's discovery, it's caused historians to admit that they were wrong about Roman technology and said that it caused them to question what they were capable of. The mystery of Greek fire. Greek fire was a weapon used by the Byzantine Empire in the medieval period, primarily during the 7th to 12th centuries. It was a highly effective incendiary weapon that could be used to set enemy ships on fire and cause chaos and destruction on the battlefield. The exact composition of Greek fire is not known with certainty, as the recipe was a closely guarded secret. However, it is believed to have been a type of liquid fire that could stick to surfaces and continue to burn even when exposed to water. Greek fire was typically deployed using a flamethrower-like device called a siphon, which allowed the user to direct a stream of the liquid fire towards their target. It was also sometimes launched in pots or jars, which would break upon impact and release the fire. One of the reasons that Greek fire was so effective was that it was difficult to extinguish. Water could actually make it burn more intensely, and attempts to smother it with sand or other materials were often unsuccessful. The use of Greek fire helped the Byzantine Empire to fend off numerous attacks by enemy forces, including the Arab and Viking fleets. However, over time the technology and techniques for creating and deploying the weapon were lost, and by the 14th century it was no longer used in warfare. The exact composition of Greek fire is not known, as no written records of the formula have survived. However, historians have been able to identify some general characteristics of the weapon based on historical accounts and contemporary descriptions. Historians have detailed some of the general characteristics of Greek fire. It was a liquid fire that could be sprayed or thrown at targets. It was highly flammable and burned fiercely, even when exposed to water. It was difficult to extinguish and could continue to burn on water. It could be directed at a specific target using a siphon or similar device. It was sticky and could adhere to surfaces, making it difficult to remove. It was effective against both people and ships. It could cause panic and confusion among enemy troops, helping to break their morale. Although Greek fire is a mystery, historians and researchers have said that Greek fire was a highly effective and feared weapon that helped the Byzantine Empire to defend against numerous attacks. Its exact composition may never be known for certain, but its general characteristics make it clear why it was so effective on the battlefield. What's underneath the Great Sphinx? The question of what is under the Great Sphinx in Egypt is a topic of much debate and speculation among archaeologists and historians. The most widely accepted theory is that there are tunnels and chambers beneath the Sphinx, but their purpose and contents remain unknown. Some archaeologists and Egyptologists believe that the tunnels and chambers may have been part of the complex system of tombs and temples that surround the Sphinx and the nearby pyramids. Others speculate that the chambers may have been used for religious or ritual purposes. In recent years, there have been claims that there may be a secret chamber or even an entire underground city beneath the Sphinx, but there is no scientific evidence to support these claims. It's important to note that any excavation or exploration of the area around the Sphinx would be subject to strict regulations and permits, and any discoveries would need to be carefully evaluated and documented by archaeologists and other experts. With that being said, technology has revealed that there is evidence of tunnels and shafts beneath the Great Sphinx at Giza, but their purpose and extent are still a matter of debate. During various excavations and surveys of the Sphinx and its surrounding area, researchers have identified a number of tunnels and shafts that appear to be of ancient origin. The purpose of these tunnels and shafts is not entirely clear, but they are believed to have been part of the complex system of tombs and temples that were built during the Old Kingdom period in Egypt. Some researchers have speculated that the tunnels and shafts may have been used for religious or ritual purposes, or as a means of accessing the underground water table. One idea is that of the Hall of Records. The concept of a Hall of Records hidden beneath the Great Sphinx is a popular but unfounded claim that has been put forward by a number of researchers who've studied ancient Egypt. The idea of a Hall of Records beneath the Sphinx can be traced back to a series of 19th century articles and books by French author Edgar Cayce. According to Cayce, the Hall of Records was a vast library of ancient knowledge and wisdom, containing information about the lost civilization of Atlantis, as well as other lost civilizations and technologies. As of right now, mainstream scientists have said that there is no archaeological evidence to support the existence of such a hall, and the theory has been dismissed by mainstream scholars. Moreover, the idea of a vast underground library being hidden beneath the Sphinx raises many practical questions, such as how such a structure could be constructed and maintained without leaving any trace or evidence. The mysterious Wandjina cave paintings. The Wandjina cave paintings are a collection of ancient rock art located in the Kimberley region of Western Australia. These paintings are believed to have been created by the indigenous people of the region, known as the Wandjina or Wandjina people, who have lived in the area for tens of thousands of years. The Wandjina cave paintings are known for their distinctive style and their depictions of humanoid figures with large round eyes and no mouths. These figures are believed to represent the Wandjina spirits, who are considered to be the creators of the land and the guardians of the people. The paintings are typically made using red and white ochre and are found in a variety of locations, including caves, rock shelters, and overhangs. Many of the paintings are located in remote and difficult-to-reach areas and are considered to be of great cultural and spiritual significance to the indigenous people of the region. The Wandjina cave paintings are thought to be among the oldest examples of rock art in the world, with some estimates suggesting that they may be as much as 40,000 years old. They are an important part of the cultural heritage of the Wandjina people and are also recognized as an important archaeological and artistic resource by the wider world. Due to the depictions of humanoids, it's caused some to suggest that the figures are actually extraterrestrials, further noting that these interpretations can be seen in various cave paintings across the world and suggest that perhaps ancient humans came into contact with something otherworldly. However, historians have said that the Wandjina cave paintings do not depict aliens and say that the figures depicted in the paintings are believed to represent the Wandjina spirits, which are an important part of the indigenous religious and cultural traditions of the Kimberley region of Western Australia. The sea serpent spotted by the crew of HMS Daedalus. The sighting of the HMS Daedalus sea serpent occurred on August 6, 1848, when crew members of the British Royal Navy ship HMS Daedalus reported seeing an enormous sea serpent in the waters of the mid-Atlantic Ocean. According to the accounts, the creature was said to be around 60 feet long, with a head resembling that of a snake or a lizard, and a neck that rose approximately 6 feet out of the water. The creature's body was described as being thick and covered in scales, with a coloration that alternated between light brown and black. It was also said to have humps on its back that moved up and down in a wave-like motion. The sighting reportedly lasted for around 20 minutes and was witnessed by several crew members, including the ship's captain, Peter McQuay. The creature was said to be moving at a speed of around 15 miles per hour and appeared to be heading east. The incident gained widespread media attention and sparked a great deal of debate and speculation about the existence of sea monsters. Some skeptics dismissed the sighting as a misidentification of a known creature, such as a giant squid or a whale, while others believed it to be proof of the existence of previously unknown species. Oddly enough, this creature was sighted and described by those who spent the majority of their life at sea, and so researchers into the unknown have said that they would easily be able to identify sea creatures local to the region, saying that this adds weight to the theory that the crew encountered a mysterious unknown creature. In the years since the sighting, there has been much speculation and analysis of the accounts, with some suggesting that the creature may have been a hoax perpetrated by the crew, or that it was a misidentification of a known animal. However, the sighting remains one of the most well-known and intriguing sea monster reports in history. The mystery of Sri Lanka's Stargate. The Sri Lanka Stargate, also known as the Kotuwe Card Stargate, is a mysterious artifact located in Sri Lanka that has long fascinated scholars and enthusiasts of the paranormal. The artifact is a circular stone disc, measuring approximately 3 feet in diameter, with intricate carvings of cosmic and geometric patterns. The origins of the Sri Lanka Stargate are shrouded in mystery, with some theories suggesting that it was created by an ancient civilization with advanced knowledge of astronomy and cosmology. The carvings on the disc are said to depict a variety of celestial objects, including stars, planets, and galaxies, as well as symbols and diagrams related to ancient religious and spiritual traditions. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Sri Lanka Stargate is its alleged ability to act as a portal or gateway to other dimensions or realities. According to some accounts, the disc was used in ancient times by priests or shamans as a means of accessing other realms of consciousness or communicating with beings from other worlds. While the claims of the Sri Lanka Stargate's supernatural abilities remain unproven, the artifact continues to fascinate researchers and enthusiasts of the paranormal. Some have even speculated that the disc may have extraterrestrial origins, or that it may hold the key to unlocking the secrets of advanced ancient civilizations. Despite the intrigue and speculation surrounding the Sri Lanka Stargate, the artifact remains a subject of debate and controversy within the scientific and archaeological communities. While some believe that the disc may hold important clues to unlocking the mysteries of the universe, others are skeptical of its alleged powers and origins. Despite the uncertainties surrounding the Sri Lanka Stargate, its mysterious carvings and intriguing history continue to capture the imagination of those who seek to understand the secrets of the universe and the mysteries of the past. Whether or not the artifact holds the key to unlocking these secrets remains to be seen, but its continued study and investigation will undoubtedly inspire new discoveries and insights for years to come. The mystery of the lost city of Paititi. The city of Paititi, also known as El Dorado, is a legendary lost city that is said to be located somewhere in the jungles of South America, possibly in the Andes Mountains. It is believed to be a vast, wealthy metropolis that was hidden away by the Inca civilization to keep it safe from Spanish conquistadors during the 16th century. According to the legend, the city is made entirely of gold and other precious metals, and contains vast treasures beyond imagination, including artifacts, gems, and precious stones. It's also said to be home to a powerful ruler who possesses great wisdom and knowledge, and who is protected by a fierce army of warriors. The story of the lost city has captured the imaginations of explorers, adventurers, and treasure hunters for centuries, and many expeditions have been launched in search of the lost city. However, despite extensive searches and investigations, no concrete evidence of the city's existence has ever been found. The legend is believed to have originated from the traditions of indigenous peoples in South America and has been passed down through generations. Some historians and archaeologists believe that the story may have been inspired by real-life events, such as the flight of the Inca Emperor Atahualpa during the Spanish conquest of Peru, when he is said to have hidden vast amounts of treasure in the Andes Mountains. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the legend of Paititi continues to inspire speculation and fascination, and the search for the lost city remains a popular topic among adventurers and explorers. The location of the city of El Dorado is uncertain and has been the subject of much speculation over the years. According to legend, the city is believed to be located somewhere in the jungles of South America, possibly in the Andes Mountains, but the exact location has been a mystery for centuries, with many explorers and adventurers launching expeditions to try to find the lost city. Interestingly, some have suggested that the lost city is in the Amazon rainforest. As of today, researchers and explorers are constantly making interesting discoveries in the Amazon rainforest, with one of the most recent finds being that of ancient pyramids and roadways. Archaeologists have said that there are ancient archaeological sites and ruins scattered throughout the Amazon region, including impressive examples of pre-Columbian engineering, such as causeways, mounds, and terraced hillsides. The Amazon rainforest is a vast and largely unexplored region, and there is always the possibility that new archaeological discoveries could be made in the future. Despite many claims and rumors of sightings, no concrete evidence of the lost city's existence has ever been found, leading some to believe that it may be purely a mythical place. However, the legend of Paititi continues to inspire speculation and fascination among many, and the search for the lost city remains a popular topic among adventurers and explorers. The Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine. The Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine is a legendary mine said to be located somewhere in the Superstition Mountains of Arizona, USA. According to the legend, the mine contains a vast fortune in gold and other precious metals, and has been sought after by treasure hunters and adventurers for over a century. The story of the Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine dates back to the mid-19th century, when a German immigrant named Jacob Waltz, also known as the Dutchman, claimed to have discovered the mine while prospecting in the Superstition Mountains. According to Waltz, he had stumbled upon a vein of gold so rich that he was able to collect large quantities of ore simply by scraping the surface of the rock with a knife. Over the years, the story of Waltz's discovery grew into a legend, and many treasure hunters and adventurers attempted to locate the lost mine. However, despite extensive searches, the mine was never found, and Waltz himself passed away without revealing its location. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the legend of the Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine continued to inspire fascination and speculation, and many theories and stories emerged about the mine's location and the fate of those who sought it. Some claimed that the mine was guarded by supernatural forces, while others suggested that Waltz had taken the secret of its location to his grave. In the decades that followed, countless expeditions were launched in search of the lost mine, and many stories emerged of treasure hunters who had supposedly discovered it, only to meet with misfortune or disappear under mysterious circumstances. However, despite the persistent search, the Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine has never been definitively located. Today, the legend of the Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine remains a popular topic among treasure hunters, adventurers, and folklore enthusiasts. While some believe that the mine is purely a myth, others continue to search for its elusive location, hoping to uncover the vast fortune that is said to lie hidden in the Superstition Mountains. The Mysterious Treasure of Lima. The Treasure of Lima is a legendary treasure said to have been hidden by Spanish forces during the War of Independence in Peru in the early 19th century. According to the legend, the treasure consists of a vast collection of gold, silver, jewels, and other precious objects, valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. The story of the Treasure of Lima dates back to 1820, when Spanish forces were fighting against the forces of Peruvian independence. As the Spanish forces retreated, they are said to have gathered up a vast treasure of gold and silver objects from the churches, convents, and palaces of Lima, the capital city of Peru at the time. The treasure was reportedly loaded onto a convoy of mules and wagons and transported out of the city under cover of darkness. The convoy made its way across the Andes Mountains to the coast, where the treasure was reportedly hidden in a cave or a remote location. Over the years, the legend of the Treasure of Lima has inspired countless treasure hunters and adventurers to search for the lost treasure. Many stories have emerged of treasure hunters who claim to have discovered the location of the treasure, only to be thwarted by deadly traps or treacherous terrain. Despite the persistent search, the location of the Treasure of Lima has never been definitively discovered, and the treasure remains one of the most elusive and sought-after treasures in the world. In recent years, however, new evidence has emerged that suggests that the treasure may be located in a complex system of underground tunnels and chambers beneath the city of Lima. The tunnels were reportedly constructed by Spanish forces during the colonial period, and were later used as a hideout by rebel forces during the War of Independence. While the location of the Treasure of Lima remains a mystery, the legend of the treasure continues to inspire fascination and speculation among treasure hunters and adventurers around the world. Whether or not the treasure will ever be found remains to be seen, but the search for the elusive treasure is sure to continue for many years to come. The Treasure of the Esperanza. The Treasure of the Esperanza is a legendary treasure said to have been hidden by Spanish forces during the Mexican-American War in the mid-19th century. According to the legend, the treasure consists of a vast collection of gold, silver, jewels, and other precious objects valued at millions of dollars. The story of the Treasure of the Esperanza dates back to 1846, when the Mexican-American conflict broke out between the United States and Mexico. As the war raged on, a Spanish galleon named the Esperanza was reportedly sailing off the coast of Mexico, carrying a valuable cargo of gold, silver, and other treasures. In order to avoid capture by the American forces, the crew of the Esperanza reportedly buried the treasure on a remote island off the coast of Mexico. The location of the island and the treasure's hiding place were reportedly marked by a set of cryptic clues and symbols known only to the crew of the galleon. Over the years, the legend of the Treasure of the Esperanza has inspired countless treasure hunters and adventurers to search for the lost treasure. Many stories have emerged of treasure hunters who claim to have discovered the location of the treasure, only to be thwarted by deadly traps or treacherous terrain. Despite the persistent search, the location of the Treasure of the Esperanza has never been definitively discovered, and the treasure remains one of the most elusive and sought-after treasures in the world. In recent years, however, new evidence has emerged that suggests that the treasure may be located on the coast of Mexico, near the site where the Esperanza was last seen. Some treasure hunters believe that the clues to the treasure's location are hidden in ancient maps and documents, while others believe that advanced technology, such as ground-penetrating radar, may be used to locate the treasure. While the location of the Treasure of the Esperanza remains a mystery, the legend of the treasure continues to inspire fascination and speculation among treasure hunters and adventurers around the world. Whether or not the treasure will ever be found remains to be seen, but the search for the elusive treasure is sure to continue for many years to come. Who were the mysterious sea people? Though there were many ancient civilizations that had existed during the 12th century BC, suddenly and quite unexpectedly, nearly every civilization was wiped from the face of the earth except for the cities of Egypt. This phenomenon was recorded as the Late Bronze Age collapse, and it's said that only small villages survived this sudden catastrophe. For many decades, the cause of such an occurrence had widely been unknown and shrouded in mystery. That was until the ancient language of the Egyptian hieroglyphics had been decoded and allowed us to read the historical records captured at the time by the last standing ancient civilization. This record has led to countless theories and endless debate amongst Egyptologists, classic historians and archaeologists since its findings. Over 2,000 years before the Vikings sailed from today's Scandinavia to plague the Europeans, the ancient world empires faced a terrifying sea-travelling enemy of their own, and that has remained a mystery up to today. During the Bronze Age, the Sea People caused terror in the Mediterranean and Egyptian lands, but their origin and identity has remained a mystery until this day. An inscription written in the 13th century BC said that they came from the sea in their ships and that nobody could defeat them. Reportedly, by the historical accounts of the ancient Egyptians, armies of what had been referred to at the time as sea people attacked and demolished the cities of man. In fact, the descriptions of the armies of the sea people describe monsters and giants coming from the oceans and waging war against all of civilization. The reasoning for why this sudden onslaught had occurred has yet to be understood, but what's surprising is the vast amount of theories surrounding the events. Accounts continue of the Egyptians attempting to track the source of the beasts that appeared humanoid in nature, and it's reported that they found hundreds of footprints coming from the beaches of the Mediterranean Sea. Today, after uncovering vast art depicting the battles, documents detailing the events, and further evidence of war and tactics used against the destroyed and forgotten civilizations of the past, the proof of the account of the sea people appears to be overwhelming in nature. As a matter of fact, the events are so overwhelming that the discussion surrounding the event in the scientific community has been somewhat confusing, and further theories or attempts at uncovering the truth are treated with ridicule. The Egyptian inscriptions provide almost all there is to know about the sea people, apart from the references in the letters from Assyrians and Hittites that have contributed to the subject. They were also mentioned in the Egyptian literature, the Tale of Wenemum, where they appear as familiar figures in the Mediterranean land. Who were the sea people that invaded ancient Egypt? Everything known about the sea people comes from apocalyptic inscriptions that were made by the empires they battled, especially ancient Egyptians, since they did not leave any written records or monuments of their own. One early reference goes back to the 1300 BC during the ruling of Pharaoh Meremptah, as he claimed of taking out over 6,000 seafarers after they allied with the Libyans. An even more detailed account from Ramses III, who fought with the sea people back in 1170, described them as having moved southwestern towns in Turkey, Levant and Cyprus, desolating its residents and leaving the city as if it had never existed. The Ekwesh have been related to the Ahiyawa in the records of Hitti, who may be Achaean Greeks who colonized the western Anatolian coast and the Aegean islands. They consisted of sea raiders who invaded the towns at the Mediterranean coast between 1276 and 1178 BC, focusing mostly on Egypt. History considers them as the major contributors to the collapse of the Bronze Age between 1250 and 1150 BC. Where did the sea people come from? Scholars are still not certain of the origins of these groups, but many trace them to Sicily, Turkey's Anatolia region, or the Aegean Sea. Some modern historians have a theory that the ancient Egyptians knew the origins of the sea people based on what they wrote about them. Due to the fact that these Egyptian inscriptions did not mention the origins of the groups, some historians believe that their origin was so obvious that it did not need to be written down. There are some speculations, with little evidence that the sea people were in fact the Philistines of the Bible, who probably battled with ancient Israel, but who they are is still a mystery. Their origin has also been proposed and strongly disputed to be Trojan. From Italy, Philistine or Minoa, however, nothing has been discovered so far to shed more light on the question of their origin. Whether all this is true or not, the fact remains that the sea people's origins are not written in any records, and that information is therefore lost to history. What did they want? Equally mysterious is the motivation of the sea people to ravage the Mediterranean. Some historians believe that they were displaced from their original home by natural disaster or famine. Other researchers state that the sea people were Trojans displaced after they lost their kingdom to the Greeks in the Trojan battle. Whether the Trojan War story is true or is just a mythical story is unknown. The sea people attacked many cities and Mediterranean settlements, but seemingly had an affinity for Egypt, attacking 3 different pharaohs. Their intentions for an attack, however, despite much research, remains a mystery to this day. What happened once they took over Egypt? Even though their origin remains unknown, tantalizing pieces of information about the damage that the sea people inflicted on the ancient worlds are available thanks to the inscriptions the witnesses of the devastation left. Most of the current studies of the sea people come from the inscriptions left behind from Ramesses III's reign. Emmanuel de Rouge, a French Egyptologist, came up with the term sea people in 1855 because reports claimed that they originated from the sea or islands, but did not specify the particular ones. There were 3 pharaohs who recorded their interaction with these raiders: Ramesses II, Meremptah, who was his son and successor, and Ramesses III. All three pharaohs were victorious over their enemies, and their inscriptions provided more detail about the existence of the Sea People. Ramses II and his inscriptions. Ramses II was one of the greatest rulers of ancient Egyptian history, with accomplishments including securing his borders from invasion by nomads and also securing trade routes that were vital to their economy. In his inscriptions, he mentions the Sea People as allies of the Hittites and mercenaries in his own army. He does not mention anything about their identity or where they came from. Ramses inscribed his victory over the Sea People in a war off the Egyptian coast. According to what he inscribed, the battle involved only the Shurdan tribe of the Sea People, and after the war, many were recruited into Ramses's army. In his inscriptions, Ramses made the impression that he neutralized the threat. However, his successors' inscriptions claimed otherwise. The inscription of Meremptah. The Sea People troubled Meremptah's reign, especially after they allied with the Libyans in the Nile Delta invasion. From his inscriptions in his 5th year, the Libyan chief allied with the Sea People invading Egypt. Meremptah describes the Sea People in his inscriptions as formidable adversaries and took pride in defeating them. He claimed complete victory over the Sea People, securing the Egyptian borders. He celebrated his victory by immortalizing its inscription in the Meremptah stele, announcing how he brought peace to his land by subduing the enemy. Where did they go afterward? Ramses III knew of the clashes of the Sea People with his predecessors and opted for guerrilla tactics instead of field engagements with his predecessors. He organized ambushes along the coast and down the Nile Delta, hiding his archers along the shore so that they could rain arrows on the ships when he gave the signal. After confirming that no crew on the ship were alive, they set the downing vessels on fire with flaming arrows. After crushing the sea attacks, Ramses III focused on what was left of the Sea People on land. He used the same tactics and finally defeated the Sea People in 1170 right BC. After being defeated by Ramses III, the Sea People disappeared from history. However, according to San Jose State University, the Egyptians allowed the remaining Sea People to settle in today's Israel and Palestine. Despite the win over the Sea People, the battle drained the Egyptian royal treasury, rendering it unable to pay its tomb builders. This resulted in the first recorded labor strike in history, where the workers refused to work until they were fully paid. The mysterious sea serpent encounter of Hans Egede. Hans Egede was a Norwegian-Danish Lutheran missionary who founded the settlement of Nuuk in Greenland in the early 18th century. In 1734, he reported seeing a sea serpent in the waters near Greenland, which he described in detail. According to Egede's account, the sea serpent was approximately 60 feet long, with a head the size of a horse's head and a long, slender neck. He noted that the creature moved quickly through the water, with its head and neck often visible above the surface. Egede also described the serpent's skin as being covered in rough, hard scales, with a color that was a mixture of grey and black. He noted that the serpent had 2 large, round eyes that were yellow in color, and that it had a large mouth filled with sharp teeth. Egede's account of the sea serpent was met with some skepticism at the time, and many people believed that he had simply seen a large fish or some other aquatic creature. However, the report of the sea serpent caught the attention of naturalists and other scientists, and it helped to spark a renewed interest in the study of marine biology and oceanography. In the years since Egede's sighting, there have been numerous other reports of sea serpents and other mysterious creatures in the world's oceans. The mysterious disappearance of David Guerrero. David Guerrero was a 21-year-old student who disappeared in the early hours of March 8, 2005, in downtown Austin, Texas. His disappearance has remained a mystery for over a decade, with no solid leads or conclusive evidence of what happened to him. On the night of March 7, 2005, David and his friends were celebrating spring break and had visited several bars in the downtown area. They eventually ended up at a popular nightclub located on East 6th Street. David was last seen leaving the club at around 2 in the morning. He was reportedly walking towards his car, which was parked several blocks away. David never made it home that night, and his family and friends immediately became concerned when they were unable to reach him. They reported him missing to the Austin Police Department on March 9, 2005. Over the years, there have been several leads and possible sightings of David, but none of them have led to any conclusive evidence of his whereabouts. In 2006, a private investigator hired by David's family received a tip that he had been spotted in Mexico, but this lead ultimately turned out to be a dead end. In 2011, the case received renewed attention when a witness came forward claiming to have seen David in a homeless camp in downtown Austin shortly after his disappearance. The witness described a man matching David's description and claimed to have spoken to him briefly. However, despite an extensive search of the area, no further evidence was found. The circumstances surrounding David's disappearance are still a mystery, and his case remains unsolved. His family and friends continue to hold out hope that he will one day be found, and the Austin Police Department has stated that they will continue to investigate any new leads or information that comes to light. A full moon may affect human behavior. There has been a long-standing belief that the full moon can cause behavior changes in humans, including increased aggression, with some reports saying that people reported that they couldn't control themselves. Several studies have examined the relationship between the full moon and behavior changes, but although the results have been interesting, they have been somewhat inconsistent. Some studies have found a correlation between the full moon and increased hospital admissions for psychiatric emergencies, while others have found no such relationship. One possible explanation for the belief in full moon behavior changes is the psychological phenomenon of confirmation bias. This is the tendency to notice and remember information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs or expectations, while disregarding information that contradicts them. In other words, people may be more likely to notice instances of aggressive behavior during a full moon and attribute them to the lunar cycle, while overlooking similar behavior at other times. Another possible explanation is the placebo effect, in which people experience a change in behavior simply because they expect to. If someone believes that the full moon will cause them to become more unstable, they may act in ways that confirm this belief, even if there is no direct causal relationship between the moon and their behavior. Unsolved mysteries have always intrigued people because they represent the unknown and the unexplained, which can be both fascinating and unsettling. Humans are naturally curious creatures, and we are always looking for answers to the questions that intrigue us. Soldiers share their mysterious encounters. Soldiers deserve the highest respect. Opinions aside, they go into areas where many of us will never tread, and they are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. Something that many soldiers don't expect to happen is having mysterious encounters while on duty. In recent years, military personnel have come forward and detailed some of the strange things that they've experienced while on duty. One soldier titled their post as "Strange Encounter While on Duty." They said the following: "I was a young sergeant in 2001, and I was stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base. I would often guard equipment, and it's known that the area is highly sensitive. Most of the time I would be on guard, and nothing interesting would happen. There were many times that I would be bored, and the job would be repetitive, but that all changed when I had a mysterious encounter. At the time, there were 2 of us who were on patrol, and it was my partner who first noticed something strange. In the distance, he claimed he could see a red light, and that every so often it would pulsate. We were located near the outskirts of the base, and so thought that it may have been an aircraft in the distance. Around 10 minutes later, both of us witnessed the bright light descending nearby. The 2 of us hadn't seen these lights before, so naturally we were both suspicious of what this was. We couldn't make out any insignia or any propulsion system. The aircraft would rise again to around 100 feet in the air, and once the object was within our sight again, we got a much better look. It was like a huge ball of energy, and was as if someone had shrunk the sun. As the encounter continued, we started to notice a pattern. The object would fly around the base, descend, and then fly into the air again, and it kept doing this over and over. While it was doing this repetitive motion, it was making no sound, and it was hard for us to keep track of it, because once it descended, we would lose sight of it. After this, the object darted towards us, and must have stopped within 40 feet, at which point we were able to see some closer details. This thing was a perfect sphere, and moved around at extreme speeds. But the strangest thing was that it moved in an angular way, like if you were playing an old computer game and you had drawn out lines and then the object would follow those lines. It's hard to describe, but the movement wasn't fluid. It wasn't like a plane that has to turn slowly in order to maneuver, or a balloon that gets taken by the wind. Every time this object moved, it was always at an angle. Although the movements of this thing were jarring, the speeds it was hitting were incredible. And if you blinked, it would be in a completely different place. It was like the light would turn off and then reappear in another part of the sky. After around 10 minutes, the object just vanished, and we were no longer able to see it. It made me think that if my partner had not pointed out the strange light in the first place, then it's likely that I wouldn't have noticed it, especially because it made no noise. Our chief sergeant pulled me in for a conversation after catching wind of what we had encountered, and honestly, it didn't go the way I thought it would. I was thinking that I would be put down and told that I didn't see anything, but instead, those who were in the room seemed interested in the sighting. When I asked what this thing was and whether anyone else had seen it, I got very little back, but was told at the end that it would be best if I kept this to myself. Although nothing super eventful happened, I never got closure on what the object was, and still to this day think about how that strange light was able to hit the speed it did." End quote. Interestingly, there have been many reported sightings of a massive legendary creature that's been described as looking like a large humanoid. They are mostly sighted in remote areas, sometimes in urban areas, and very rarely in city parks. However, the most unlikely place you would think to see one of these creatures is near a military base. Throughout the years, there have been a few reports that have leaked from military installations, mostly those around the 1970s. By far the most notable and the most credible is that of an encounter near Fort Lewis in the United States. This is an Army military installation in Washington state, which is in the middle of a rather large wooded area. The year was 1978. A truck full of soldiers coming back from training exercises broke down at around 8 in the evening. Attempts were made to restart the engine, but nothing worked, so the platoon headed off to the base on foot to bring back a tow truck. They left one Edwin Godoy to guard the truck until the tow truck arrived. He was left because he was the one who had signed out the truck. Edwin spent hours by himself just sitting in the truck. He was bored, but his evening would soon perk up. At around midnight, he began to hear strange sounds from the forest that this road cut through. The sounds continued to get louder and closer, prompting Edwin to get out of the truck, arming himself with a rifle and a flashlight. As he stood in front of the truck, sweeping the sides of the woods with his flashlight, he caught a glimpse of a large object moving directly in front of the truck. It was a tall, broad creature entirely covered in hair that walked by swinging its body sideways. When Irvin shined his light at it, it stopped in its tracks and stared directly at him. They locked eyes for a short time before the creature began to run at him at a bafflingly quick speed. Irvin shouted 3 times for the creature to stop and identify itself. However, the beast didn't reply and got close enough to cause harm to Edwin. Gripped with fear, he shot the creature in the chest. This barely stopped the speed of the animal. It merely growled, grabbed its chest, and turned to the right and went back into the forest. In a few seconds, it was gone. After a long and fearful night, the mechanics finally arrived. After Edwin conveyed what happened, they were quite skeptical, until one spotted the blood trail that led to massive footprints pressed into the nearby soft ground. Shortly after, a radio call was made to the base explaining what had happened, and after doing this, the area was swamped with secretive government scientists in hazardous material suits. These researchers then began taking blood samples and setting casts of the footprints. The whole time, Edwin was told not to speak to anyone and was kept away from what was going on. Edwin was quickly taken away to the base hospital, but surprisingly, instead of being examined by the base's medical staff, he was examined by a doctor from the Air Force that held the rank of full colonel. Years later, Edwin went on to reveal in an interview after the event had been declassified that rather than interrogating him, the colonel was very interested in every slight detail of the event. After which, Edwin was returned to his barracks and told in no circumstances was he to tell anyone what happened. The NASA employee who went missing in the Grand Canyon. Back on the 17th of June 2016, a man by the name of Floyd Roberts III had gone on a hiking trip with a longtime friend of his, Ned Bryant, and his friend's daughter, Madeline Bryant. However, after several hours of hiking together, Floyd suddenly disappeared from the group. As the weeks went on and the investigation into the matter was never resolved, many began to wonder what exactly happened to Floyd Roberts within the very short span of time that he had wandered away from his group. According to Ned Bryant, he and Floyd had been lifelong friends since they were 10 years old, when they first met each other back in Princeton, New Jersey. Their friendship was so close that many would often think that Ned and Floyd were actually brothers. Their friendship would even coalesce and maintain throughout their entire lives, with Floyd Roberts serving as Ned's best man during his wedding several years prior. Unfortunately, due to work requirements and job opportunities, the two men were unable to live close to each other, with Floyd Roberts eventually moving out to the city of Huntsville, Alabama, where he spent a short period of time working as a software engineer for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. After a short time of working for NASA, Floyd Roberts moved once more to work as a computer programming and game design teacher at Middleton High School, located in Treasure Island, Florida. However, throughout this time, Floyd and Ned decided to stay close friends and would meet up regularly to do an activity together. It was back in 1992 when Floyd and Ned decided that they would start hiking around the Grand Canyon a few times a year, as it would be a fun activity for them to both do that would also allow them to take a break from their lives momentarily and get some much-needed exercise. These routine hiking trips would continue for over the next 20 years together, where the two men became highly experienced campers and hikers, familiar with the Grand Canyon as it was their only hiking route. Even more interesting, the two men were so interested in hiking that they would often travel alone in their free time whenever the other was unable to join, showing that both men had experience navigating the known pathways of the area, even when isolated and on their own. Several years later, Ned Bryant and a few other members of his family became board members of the Grand Canyon Hikers and Backpackers Association, often sharing tips with each other on the best pathways and means of travel throughout the area, and having been trained in travel safety when hiking through isolated parts of the Grand Canyon. Confident that the two would be perfectly safe during their journey, the men planned to take one of their longest hiking and camping trips yet, choosing to spend 9 days hiking through the Shivwitz Plateau, a pathway that would lead them out of the area through the Separation Canyon. Although the region was a typically less popular area to travel through, their decided route was considered to have been largely very safe, without any major pitfalls or ravines close to their trails. Additionally, the two men decided that the beginning of the journey would be the most relaxed and planned on spending the first couple of days camping alongside the major river in the area before making their way out of the canyon. After careful consideration, the two men planned their trip and decided that their hike would end after 9 days on the 26th of June, 2016. At the last minute, Ned's daughter, Madeline Bryant, decided to join the group, and so the group decided that the easiest path down towards the river they had wanted to camp beside for a few days was to first reach the Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument when entering from the furthest western portion of the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument is considered to be a remote location and terribly underdeveloped given the lack of tourists that tend to visit the area. According to official park services, there are no known paved roads or laid-out trails leading to the national monument and no visitor services of any kind. Regardless, the group decided the open area and the lack of tourists would be a perfect staging ground to enter towards the river without the stress of strangers crowding around the area. Once the group was several miles away from the main trailhead of the area, the three travelers found themselves traveling over a large hill. Given Floyd Roberts' preference for a longer traveling time to help take in the scenery, he decided that he would take the slow, rounding trail that followed the contours of the hill to reach the trailhead, whereas Madeline and Ned decided that a straight path over the hill would allow them to reach the trailhead faster and give them time to relax and take a quick rest. At around 4:45 in the afternoon, the group separated, with Ned and his daughter taking a straight-line path, and Floyd Roberts following the trail that wrapped around the side of the hill. Several minutes later, Ned and Madeline would reach the trailhead and decide to take a short rest, waiting for Floyd Roberts to catch up to them. However, after about 20 minutes of waiting, the two started to worry that something had happened, and immediately began retracing their steps to look for Floyd Roberts, who they assumed must have gotten lost somewhere along the contouring path. After spending several hours looking for Floyd Roberts, the two decided that it was too dark and dangerous for them to continue their search, and so made a campsite near the trailhead meeting spot in the hopes that Floyd Roberts would be able to locate them by their fire. Unfortunately, the two said that it appeared as if Floyd had just completely disappeared, and so Ned and Madeline hiked their way to the nearest area with cell phone reception to report Floyd Roberts as missing. The two reported Floyd Roberts' disappearance at around 3 in the afternoon on Saturday, June 18th. Almost immediately, a team of search and rescue working for the national park started their search for Floyd Roberts, covering a 10-mile radius of where he had last been seen by Ned Bryant and his daughter. The search and rescue originally showed up for the search efforts in high spirits, believing that Roberts would have been recovered quickly, given the fact that the weather in the area did not drop anywhere near freezing temperatures and stayed relatively high throughout the day and night. Additionally, Floyd Roberts had been carrying a week's supply of food and over 2 gallons of water in his backpack at the time of his disappearance, so it was believed that he would have more than enough supplies and years of experience to help him navigate his way towards help, if necessary. Over the next few days, an estimated 15 people were involved with the search and rescue of Floyd Roberts, with a team of sniffer dogs used to follow his scent. It was at around this time that a set of footprints had been discovered that followed down the direction of the trail that Ned and his daughter Madeline had claimed Floyd was last seen traveling down. As the dogs followed the trail, it appeared as if they had locked onto the scent of Roberts and continued in the direction of the footprints for several hundred feet before they suddenly stopped. Search and rescuers then noticed that the footprints of Floyd Roberts seemed to have suddenly disappeared, as if Roberts had been walking and then rose into the air and vanished. It was at this point that the National Park Service rescue helicopter was used to get aerial views of the surrounding 10-mile radius, but were unable to locate any signs of someone having fallen down any side paths or in any known areas. After 6 days of frantic searching and thousands of man-hours, the search and rescue for Floyd Roberts slowed down to a passive search. To this day, no sign of Roberts has been recovered. According to official search and rescue reports, Floyd Roberts was last seen wearing a red long-sleeved shirt, blue denim jeans, a large blue low alpine contour backpack, white-rimmed sunglasses with orange lenses, and 2 gallons of water with enough food to last him about a week. The disappearance of Margaret Mary Kohler. On the 20th of February, back in 2011, a 53-year-old woman by the name of Margaret Kohler would suddenly vanish after planning a short daytime visit to the Cummins Creek Wilderness. Although investigators originally thought that Margaret's case was that of an inexperienced hiker traveling too deep within the national park forest, investigators would soon realize that Margaret Kohler would frequently travel to the Cummins Creek Wilderness to forage for wild mushrooms and truffles. According to Margaret's friend, Mrs. Kohler had become quite familiar with the region and would often take weekly trips to the area with her 5-year-old Labrador Border Collie mix named Roscoe. Growing up in the seaside city of Waldport, Oregon, Margaret Kohler had become highly experienced with the outdoors, Cummins Creek Wilderness, and the surrounding trails, and was known by her friends and family as having been an avid hiker. Yet regardless of her vast amount of wilderness experience and her many safety precautions, Margaret Kohler would seemingly vanish with no trace of her left behind. The search for Margaret would begin on the day of her disappearance after her friend contacted the local sheriff's department and claimed that she was unable to make contact with Mrs. Kohler at their scheduled time. Due to her frequently traveling alone, Margaret was worried that if she did not take the necessary precautions, she could end up injured and stranded out in the national park without anyone knowing she was gone. It was for this very reason that Margaret told her friend prior to her trip that she was planning on taking Roscoe for a walk near the Cape Perpetua area. Although the last time Margaret had been seen was on the 19th of February, after getting an expected time frame of Margaret's itinerary from her friend, detectives were able to put an accurate time to when Margaret Kohler had arrived in the area, believed to have been during the early morning. Within only 8 hours of her disappearance, the Lane and Lincoln County Sheriff's Department, alongside the United States Forest Service and the Oregon State Police, would begin their search and rescue efforts for Margaret and Roscoe. Oddly enough, after scouring several parking lots and common stops, the search and rescue teams were unable to locate Margaret Kohler's vehicle. Given the fact that the investigators were unsure which trail Margaret Kohler had followed, it made it increasingly difficult for search and rescue teams to efficiently check a tighter radius, forcing them to expand their search to a much larger area. Local volunteer groups had spent the better part of the first 2 days walking up and down the Cape Perpetua area, but were unable to find any tracks or signs of Margaret Kohler having visited anywhere in the region. With the lack of any sign of Margaret's vehicle or equipment anywhere near the region, investigators started to wonder whether or not the missing hiker was even within the park. For this reason, in conjunction with the search and rescue efforts, the local sheriff's department would keep out a missing persons file for any information relating to Margaret's disappearance, worried that she could have been the victim of foul play or could have gotten into a car accident in an isolated area. It would be due to these suspicions that the search and rescue efforts were temporarily reduced over the course of about 2 weeks. It would not be until the 3rd of March that proof of Margaret having arrived in the park was found. According to the United States Forest Service, one of the Forest Service law enforcement officers had found Margaret's van on the side of Forest Service Road 1051 in the Cummins Ridge Trail area. The Cummins Ridge Road was a far deeper major pathway that was only accessible after driving south through an area known as Neptune State Scenic Viewpoint, past a coastal area named the Devil's Churn due to its history of supernatural sightings. Inexperienced hikers would not have been able to see that the small trail opens up into a much larger pathway, and so investigators were certain that Margaret must have visited the area several times in the past to know exactly how much room there would be for her vehicle. The vehicle itself was completely unoccupied, and after having been searched, a park receipt would be located that would confirm that Margaret Kohler had reached the park sometime on the 20th of February. Immediately after the vehicle was discovered by the United States Forest Service law enforcement officer, a massive search would be conducted in the area for a 10-mile radius. Unfortunately, despite more than 50 volunteers involved in the search, no sign of Margaret or her dog Roscoe was uncovered. On the following day, a team of bloodhounds were brought to the abandoned vehicle to help find a trackable scent. However, due to the tremendous gap in time from Margaret's initial disappearance and the discovery of her vehicle, the experienced canine teams were unable to locate a scent they could track. Oddly enough, on the 5th of March, more than 2 weeks since Margaret had disappeared, roughly 2.2 miles south of where Margaret's abandoned vehicle was located, local search and rescue volunteers would find Roscoe casually walking along the area of 10 Mile Creek. Once investigators took a closer look at Roscoe, they were surprised to find that the dog appeared to have been in perfect health. Deputies with the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office would make several attempts to get Roscoe to lead them to where Margaret may have been, but the dog seemed too playful and easily distracted, making it impossible for search and rescuers to get the dog to lead them back to Margaret. To this day, no sign of Margaret Kohler has even been uncovered. Oddly enough, across many of the bizarre missing 411 disappearances, it's commonly reported that during a sudden vanishing, hikers who travelled with a dog will often have their canines show up several days after their disappearance, but with no sign of the hiker ever being uncovered. Even more peculiar, the returning canines will often seem to be in perfect condition, regardless of the weather conditions or the number of days missing, as if no time had passed for them in the interim. The disappearance of Keith Zunke. On the 24th of October, back in 1981, a 21-year-old man by the name of Keith Zunke would be reported missing after a very bizarre set of suspicious circumstances had occurred, leading many of the investigators surrounding the incident wondering what really happened. Not only would the circumstance of Keith's disappearance be extraordinarily peculiar, the legal documents surrounding Keith's disappearance would also appear to be mishandled in various ways following his vanishing, leading to increasing difficulties for the young man's search. According to Keith's mother, when Keith was a young boy, he had suffered an undisclosed injury that would leave him crippled for the rest of his life and cause Keith to suffer from issues with typical neurodevelopment. Although the injury itself is not known in the modern day, by the time that he was a teenager, it became apparent to doctors that Keith would never be able to develop past a mental age of only 5 years old, suffering from an extensive amount of brain damage. Due to these developmental issues, Keith would eventually be forced to live in a group home by the time that he was an adult, located in Walla Walla, Washington, after his biological parents felt that they were unable to properly care for him. It would be shortly after his 21st birthday, while living in the Washington group home, that Keith would suddenly be at the center of a bizarre missing persons case that would be impossible to explain under normal circumstances. According to the official search and rescue document, it was on the 24th of October, back in 1981, while living at the Stone Creek Lodge group home located in Washington, that the group home administrators decided that taking a small trip together with all of the home's residents would be a nice change of pace for the residents. By that afternoon, all 39 residents would be driven to the Umatilla National Forest to go on a mountain hike through Oregon, east of the Cascade Range in the northeastern section of the state. The administrators of the home would later tell investigators that out of all of the residents, only 2 members objected to the trip and wished to stay at the group home instead. One of those 2 that would object would be Keith. Once at the Umatilla National Forest, Keith and another resident would both get into an argument with the administrators and refuse to continue with the hike any further, after walking a few hundred feet down a trail with the group. After the tantrum, the councillors would become fed up with Keith and the other unnamed resident, and would instruct them to return to the vehicle to wait in the car for the remainder of the trip due to their behaviour. However, at this point, the stories of the administrators and the residents begin to start cracking. According to some of the residents, Keith and the other unnamed resident had been accompanied with a group home administrator to return to the vehicle, though the other councillors and administrators on the trip would deny the claim and state that Keith and the other unnamed resident had travelled back to the vehicle while unsupervised. Once the group had finished with their hike and returned to the vehicle, they found the unnamed resident in the vehicle alone and with Keith nowhere to be found. Immediately, the councillors and administrators would question the unnamed resident, but were unable to get any reasonable information surrounding Keith's whereabouts, and so would soon contact the local law enforcement shortly after. Within the hour, the United States Forest Service and the local sheriff began a massive search for Keith, utilizing an estimated 500 search and rescue volunteers for the event. These volunteers included members from the local military, nearby law enforcement, native residents and teams of air support flying overhead for several hours a day looking for Keith. Unfortunately, despite searching non-stop for an estimated 10 days and covering nearly 50 square miles of area, no sign of Keith was ever recovered, and the search and rescue for the 21-year-old man would soon come to a standstill. It was at around this point that investigators began to grow suspicious of the parties involved. Keith's biological mother, Mrs. Rebecca Carroll, would give information to the investigators, claiming that Keith had the mental age of a 5-year-old and would have been unable to have wandered very far from where he had last been seen. Given the fact that the other unnamed resident was also unable to provide any useful information, it appeared that the entire event held a few more skeletons in the closet. It would not be for another 30 years until news surrounding the case would come forward. According to the Huffington Post, the remains of Keith were discovered by a hiker during the summer of 2011, but what was left of Keith was so damaged and scattered, investigators were left with very little. Although the remains were easily identifiable as human, they appeared to have been partially buried in a shallow grave, forcing investigators to first confirm that the remains were not from a possible Native American burial site. After the remains were confirmed as not belonging to an old Native American burial ground, investigators removed the remains and sent them to a forensic anthropologist and Oregon State medical examiner. Unfortunately, very little could be done with what was left. According to the investigators, Keith was no longer classified as a missing person. This meant that any evidence surrounding his DNA was not kept, and so Keith's DNA was not on file to be compared with the discovered remains. Additionally, because of the state of the remains, the Oregon State medical examiner said that he was unable to confirm a cause for Keith's passing. No other information has surfaced surrounding the incident since the article was reported. The mysterious disappearance of Michael and Makana Gortler. On the 22nd of June, back in 2011, a father and daughter would suddenly vanish when going on a hike to the summit of Mount Missouri, located in the state of Colorado. Although the 2 experienced hikers would reach the summit at around 14,000 feet, their remains would tell a completely different story when investigators would conduct a thorough investigation into the matter. According to the missing persons report, 53-year-old Michael von Gortler and his daughter, 20-year-old Makana von Gortler, would leave their home in Boulder, Colorado on the 14th of June to spend the summer going on a series of hiking and climbing trails together over the span of about a week. Michael, who worked as an emergency room physician in the city of Boulder, Colorado, had often visited the nearby trails and mountain ranges over the years and had become quite an experienced outdoorsman, hiker and climber across the many Colorado mountain ranges. Additionally, Michael's daughter Makana who studied out of the University of Colorado, majoring in ecology and evolutionary biology, would often spend her entire spring, summer, and winter vacations between school going on long hiking and camping trips with her father to get pictures of the natural wildlife and ecology of the local area. Makana would also be considered by many close friends and family as having been extremely experienced in both hiking and climbing, and both Makana and her father were in excellent physical shape at the time of their disappearance. It was later uncovered by investigators that Michael and Makana would spend the majority of their week-long camping and hiking trip at the father's second home. Michael's second home was a small summer house located in the town of Buena Vista, roughly 150 miles west of Boulder. It was also believed that Michael and Makana would spend that first week together, traveling to the town of Telluride and attending the Bluegrass Festival before returning back home to the summer house in Buena Vista in order to make several preparations. It would be there that the two hikers would spend several days planning their trip to Mount Missouri, including acquiring several updated maps to help plan their routes, purchase and replace new equipment for their climbs, and stock up on extra emergency gear in the event of sudden bad weather conditions or any unforeseen issues. Although their precautions may have seemed too cautious, considering the fact that the two only had plans to camp around the base of Mount Missouri for a few days and then hike the summit of the mountain before returning back to the base of the mountain on a short day trip, Michael Gortler was known for being over-prepared when it came to hiking and camping journeys. Prior to their departure, Makana would send a text to her longtime boyfriend, a man by the name of Paul Casimir, that the two were headed up to a mountain trail with a summit measured at being 14,000 feet, but that her phone had been left on the roaming setting due to their cellular network connection being out of range, and that she would be unable to text or call as she wanted to avoid using data as her data plan was more expensive when it came to using roaming data. The text she had sent would later be confirmed with a local ABC News article, which would publish the text to the boyfriend. The text would read as follows: "I just got back to Buena Vista with my dad. I left my phone on roaming so I can't talk. We had a great time and we're going to try a 14er tomorrow. I'll be able to see you in a few days. I've missed you too." The 14er would be a reference to the height of the mountain, with Makana's cryptic message, meaning that the two would be attempting to climb a summit estimated around 14,000 feet. The night before their disappearance, on the 22nd of June, at around 12:23 in the morning, Makana would send one last text to her boyfriend Paul, which would state the following: "We're hiking Mount Missouri tomorrow, staying the night here, then driving back the 23rd. I will help my dad pack the next day, so I can see you on the 25th, and we can celebrate whatever month we're in now." After a few days passed, Paul would fail to get any reply or message back from either Michael or Makana, and would begin to worry that something strange had happened. By the 24th, Paul would grow increasingly disturbed by the lack of reply that he would reach out to Makana's mother, Michael's wife, Mrs. Dea von Gortler, and ask her when the two were expected to return back to Boulder and why the two were not returning his texts or phone calls. At first, Dea would reassure Paul that the two were most likely taking their time coming back from the trip and would return sometime on the 24th of June or the 25th, but that she would reach out to Michael and Makana to check up on them. After spending a few hours trying to reach her husband and daughter and failing to get in contact with them, Mrs. Dea von Gortler would contact the Chaffee County Sheriff's Department to report the two as missing and to do a checkup on their whereabouts. At first, the search for Michael and Makana went slowly, as investigators first wanted to confirm that the two were still in the area of Mount Missouri and not back at their Buena Vista summer home. After driving an estimated 3 hours to the summer house, Mrs. Dea von Gortler would confirm that her husband and daughter were missing, and after several hours of searching, the Chaffee County Sheriff's Department would locate and find Michael von Gortler's vehicle parked at the Mount Missouri parking lot located at the base of the mountain. Almost immediately upon finding the vehicle, the Sheriff's Department would organize one of the largest ground and aerial searches conducted in the state, alongside the local military and other law enforcement organizations. On the first day of the search, the nearby military base would utilize a state-of-the-art Black Hawk helicopter to help carry search and rescue volunteers near the summit of the three surrounding 14,000-foot mountains. While ferrying people, the military would also utilize thermal imaging cameras and other sensitive equipment in the hopes of locating the missing two hikers within the first few days. Over 40 search and rescue volunteers would be brought to the summits of the mountains, an estimated 12 volunteers per peak, and would help to cover over 1,000 feet in elevation that first day, but no sign of the missing hikers were found. Investigators were worried that their search efforts may have been in vain, as the area of the mountains and their summits were completely barren and held very little foliage, making it difficult to explain how it was that aerial support was unable to spot the brightly clothed pair from the sky anywhere along the route. Even more strange, an article published in the local news would also claim that by the 8th day of the search for the missing father and daughter, it was believed that search and rescue volunteers, the Sheriff's Department, United States National Forest Rangers, and the nearby military base had covered more than 800 square miles of terrain, both by ground and air, and were unable to find any sign of the missing pair. It would not be until the 10th day of the search that investigators would finally recover the missing father and daughter, when the search helicopter was in the middle of depositing another group of search and rescue volunteers on the summit of Mount Missouri. According to the helicopter pilot, as he was descending onto the summit, the pilot claimed that he saw something incredibly unusual in the forest area directly below their passing location. Although the pilot would never describe what he saw that was considered distinctly unusual, rumors from search and rescue volunteers claimed that he saw what looked like a large figure in the area that seemed difficult to explain. Unsure of what it was that was seen, the pilot would send the volunteers into the area where they would find two individuals. According to the volunteers, the hikers were not immediately identified as belonging to Michael and Makana, as they were injured and disfigured beyond recognition. Though the pair would later be confirmed as having been the missing father and daughter, there was initially no declaration of their identities, and several other bizarre events would take place that would make missing 411 investigators suspicious as to the nature of the recovery. A group of search and rescue volunteers would claim that the couple were found in a forested area far from any ledges or cliffs, somewhere around the 12,000-foot elevation mark on the mountain. Another group would claim that they were found lying atop an open field of grass around the similar elevation mark. However, despite these conflicting stories, no confirmation of either account would be made, leading many missing 411 investigators with the suspicions that a bizarre cover-up had taken place. It would take another few days before the coroner could confirm the identity of the injured pair as belonging to Michael and Makana. However, even more peculiar, the coroner and sheriff's department worked together in order to provide an explanation of what happened to Michael and Makana, as both the coroner and sheriff's department were confused as to the exact location where they were found and the exact nature of their demise. The Chaffee County Sheriff's Department would hold a press conference on the 5th of July, claiming that the discovery of where Michael and Makana were found came as a total shock to the investigators. It was hard to understand how any accident could have occurred, as the von Gortlers had been at a high elevation and appeared to have been suffering from injuries inconsistent with a fall. Additionally, the Sheriff's Department would confirm that the weather had been exceptionally good at the time of their expected demise, as there was no measured wind, no clouds, and no sudden weather shifts that could have led to any accidents for the pair. In all considerations, the day of their disappearance was a perfect day for a short hike to the summit and back down. The most confusing statements would come from several interviewed searchers on a live broadcast from the NBC 9 Denver news station, which would claim that it was believed that the pair had to have reached the summit and fallen while they were descending the summit along a hiking trail. The searchers would claim that less than 200 feet from the summit, the pair fell. However, the Chaffee County Sheriff Pete Palmer would tell reporters that it was difficult to confirm the theory, as the distance and placement of the hikers was both too far and in too awkward of a location for the pair to have fallen from only 200 feet from the summit. The sheriff would also provide the statement to the news reporters, claiming that they were not sure where they were when they fell, as none of the information they had seemed to match up. In one report, searchers would claim they believed that the pair had fallen 200 feet from the summit while descending. Another report would claim that the bodies of the father and daughter were found in a densely forested area at the 12,000-foot elevation point, and a third report would claim that the pair were found much closer to the summit, laid out on grass. Even more peculiar, the coroner's office would claim that the damage and injuries of the pair were consistent only with a fall estimated to have been at least 1,000 feet in height at a 60-degree grade, which would have been impossible to have suffered from if only a few hundred feet from the summit, or at the 12,000-foot elevation point. Chaffee County Coroner Randy Ametis would also make several increasingly bizarre statements to reporters, claiming that the only thing known for certain was that Dr. Michael von Gortler and his daughter, Makana von Gortler, had both passed away from blunt force trauma injuries to the head and neck at almost the exact same time. At first, the coroner believed there was evidence of burn or scorch marks, but would later confirm that there was no indication of injuries caused from lightning, a strange statement that seemed both unwarranted and inconsistent. Randy Ametis would also confirm that due to the condition of the pair, it was believed that the two had passed away on the 22nd of June, the same day that the hike had initially begun. Despite the inconsistent information and data, the coroner's office would confirm that the passings were officially declared as accidents, and it was believed that no crime had been committed. The coroners would provide relatives of the von Gortler with the explanation that the two had most likely been blown off the cliff from a significant gust of wind, despite reports of clear skies and low winds. However, one of the most difficult to explain aspects of the coroner's report were the lack of injuries to other parts of the hikers. According to the searchers, Michael and Makana had to have fallen at least 1,000 feet to explain their injuries and location. At the height and steep grade, injuries would be expected to be seen across them, including small and large scrapes, bruises, torn clothes, and small and large rocks around their remains. However, the coroner's statements only included claims and descriptions that Michael and Makana had died from blunt force trauma to their head and neck, without making any other statements about injuries to the torso, legs, or other regions of the body. Given the fact that Michael and Makana, who were experienced hikers and climbers, were believed to have been on an easy trail at the time of their fall, Chaffee County Sheriff's Officer Pete Palmer would express disbelief at the mystery of their passings. A local article would publish a statement provided by the sheriff's officer and their skepticism in the middle of July, stating the following: "It hasn't been any kind of atrocious weather, and the other thing is both these people were experienced hikers," Chaffee County Sheriff Pete Palmer said. Palmer says that what happened is a complete mystery. While steep, the Missouri Mountain Trail is only ranked as a Type 2 climb, which is fairly mild. Authorities say it didn't appear the two had taken a fall. The search and rescue volunteers would also express confusion surrounding the location that the hikers were recovered. It seemed impossible to explain how the hikers were not found until the 10th day of the search in an area so close to the summit and believed to have been checked several times over by volunteers during the first week of the operation. Helicopters had also been flying in and around the area every single day since the disappearance, and not a single person had seen the pair in a location that the two were expected to have been hiking in. To this day, the mysterious passings of Michael and Makana von Gortler have been the subject of many theories and continue to be regarded as one of the most mysterious and unexplainable accidents recorded in the Colorado mountains. Unsolved mysteries have always intrigued people because they represent the unknown and the unexplained, which can be both fascinating and unsettling. Humans are naturally curious creatures, and we are always looking for answers to the questions that intrigue us. The mysterious Palpa Flat Mountain. The Palpa Flat Mountain, along with the Palpa Lines or Palpa Geoglyphs, is a mysterious site located in the Palpa province of Peru. It consists of a series of large-scale geoglyphs, which are huge designs or motifs made by removing the reddish-brown iron oxide-coated pebbles that cover the surface of the ground. The designs are formed by the exposure of the lighter-colored soil underneath and can range in size from a few feet to over 500 feet in length. However, seen as one of the most convincing pieces of evidence for ancient civilizations, having once possessed advanced technologies, is that of the archaeological discovery of the Palpa Flat Mountain. Theorists have often posited that perhaps the gods of ancient cultures that supposedly descended from the stars were not actually gods, but rather advanced life forms. This would make sense given the fact that many cultures directly write about how the gods came from the stars, or on machines that could fly. Interestingly, various civilizations talk about ancient beings descending from the sky, with amateur researchers saying that this evidence is documented across various different cultures and civilizations. Interestingly enough, the ancient Nazca tribes also seem to hold a similar belief to their religion, and the evidence in the area only shows this further, that it could very well be the case. As many different pilots flew over the area of the ancient tribes, a surprising discovery was made in regards to what they could see from the sky. Lines drawn out in the desert were made visible from the sky that appeared to be created over many miles of distance. In fact, the lines were detailed images and navigation trails that would have helped possible aircraft find areas to land and travel to. This was made only more interesting as located nearby these large creations is that of the Palpa Flat Mountain. Located on the Palpa Flat Mountain is a completely flat mountainside, as if flattened down by vast ancient technologies. This is made more peculiar as it seems to be the only flat mountain in the region, with a top that looks artificial cut from its base. Located on this flat top are lines and creations that pilots have often mistaken for a landing strip for aircraft. This has led many of the ancient theorist communities to believe that perhaps the tribe helped their gods by creating these lines in the sand that were only visible from the skies. These lines could be used similar to that as modern-day concrete arrows used to point towards landing strips and other aviation-important signals. This would be a plausible explanation as the lines on the ground are not visible and would not be able to be used religiously or for any other important purpose without the ability to see it from the sky. Interestingly enough, the lines seem to be very old and ancient and provide proof as to the tribe's advanced knowledge in geometry in order to create massive images in the sand that they could never see themselves. Additionally, these pieces appear to be images of things the tribes held with utmost importance, such as that of different kinds of animal life and strange symbols that are nearly impossible to understand. The Palpa geoglyphs are thought to have been created by the Paracas and Nazca cultures, who lived in the region between 500 BCE and 500 CE. The designs depict various animals, including birds, monkeys, spiders, and lizards, as well as geometric shapes and human-like figures. Some of the designs are so large that they can only be seen from the air, which has led to much speculation about their purpose and origin. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Palpa geoglyphs is their alignment with the celestial bodies. Many of the designs are oriented towards the sun, moon, and stars, suggesting that they may have been used for astronomical purposes. Some researchers have even proposed that the designs represent a giant star map that was used for navigation or as a calendar. Despite their apparent significance, the Palpa geoglyphs have received relatively little attention compared to their more famous neighbors, the Nazca lines. This is partly due to their location in a more remote and difficult-to-access area, as well as their smaller size and less impressive appearance from ground level. Nonetheless, the Palpa geoglyphs remain a fascinating and mysterious sight that continues to intrigue archaeologists, historians, and enthusiasts alike. The heat ray used by Archimedes. The heat ray is a legendary weapon said to have been invented by the ancient Greek mathematician and inventor Archimedes. According to the legend, the heat ray was used by Archimedes to defend the city of Syracuse against the Roman fleet in 212 BC. The heat ray was said to work by using mirrors or lenses to focus sunlight onto the Roman ships, causing them to catch fire. While there is no archaeological evidence to support the existence of the heat ray, there are some historical accounts that describe its use. One account, written by the Roman historian Lucian, describes how Archimedes used a device which he had prepared against the whole Roman fleet to set fire to the ships. Another account, written by the Roman general Marcellinus, describes how the Roman fleet was caught on fire at a distance by the concentrated burning rays and sank. While the heat ray is often dismissed as a myth or legend, some scientists and historians have attempted to recreate the weapon to see if it could have actually worked. One experiment, conducted by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 2005, used mirrors to focus sunlight onto a small wooden boat, which caught fire in just a few minutes. On the hit television show known as Mythbusters, the hosts of the show, known as Adam and Jamie, began the episode with a request on recreating the mythical heat ray that had been used by Archimedes to fight back an entire military during his day. According to the legend, Archimedes was at the shores of a massive siege between his own people and a number of Roman warships during the siege of Syracuse. Made entirely aware that his people were both outnumbered and outmatched, Archimedes began constructing what was referred to as a burning glass that would be able to burn the Roman warships and protect his people. A number of the legends and different variations exist that claim he used one large mirror to reflect the direct sunlight, whereas others claim he used the shields of 70 soldiers to redirect the light at the warships to catch them on fire. This legend has often been challenged by a number of researchers from around the world, claiming that such a story is completely fabricated and that the physics of the encounter don't seem to add up. This led to the Mythbusters attempting to recreate the event, only to find that they were completely unable to ignite a model ship at all with the use of reflective shields. But note that this experiment has been successfully recreated by other researchers. Some also note that throughout history there's been various accounts of strange devices that have been used throughout battle, with even the ancient Greeks going on to note that they once had a device that could light up enemies. Overall, the heat ray remains a fascinating and mysterious piece of ancient history, and its true existence and capabilities continue to be debated and studied by scholars and scientists today. The Viking Sunstone. The Viking Sunstone, also known as the sun compass or solar compass, is an ancient navigational tool used by the Vikings during their long voyages across the seas. The sunstone is believed to have been used by Viking navigators to determine the position of the sun even on cloudy days, when the sun was not visible. The sunstone is a type of crystal, most likely a type of calcite or cordierite, which has the unique ability to polarize light. When light passes through the crystal, it is split into two rays, each of which vibrates in a different plane. By rotating the crystal until the two rays are equal in intensity, the navigator could determine the direction of the sun, even when it was obscured by clouds or fog. Historical records suggest that the Vikings used the sunstone in combination with a shadow stick compass, which relied on the position of the sun to determine direction. The shadow stick compass consisted of a stick placed in the ground, with markings indicating the position of the sun at various times of the day. By measuring the length of the shadow cast by the stick, the navigator could determine the position of the sun and thus determine the direction of travel. While the exact use of the sunstone by the Vikings is still a subject of debate among archaeologists, recent studies have suggested that the sunstone was a highly accurate and effective navigational tool. In a 2011 study, researchers from Hungary successfully navigated a boat using a sunstone and shadow stick compass, confirming the accuracy of the Viking method. The use of the Viking sunstone is just one example of the ingenuity and resourcefulness of ancient navigators, who were able to navigate the seas using only the tools and resources available to them at the time. Today, the Viking sunstone serves as a testament to the enduring legacy of the Viking explorers and their contributions to the development of modern navigation. Leonardo da Vinci's flying machine invention. Leonardo da Vinci is widely regarded as one of the greatest minds of the Renaissance, and his vast array of inventions and designs included a number of flying machines. The most famous of these is his ornithopter, a machine that mimicked the flapping motion of bird wings to achieve lift and flight. Da Vinci's ornithopter was inspired by his fascination with birds and their ability to fly. He observed the way birds used their wings to create lift, and he began to experiment with different designs that could mimic this motion. The resulting machine featured a pair of wings made of wood and fabric, which were attached to a central axis that was powered by a system of gears and cranks. The ornithopter was designed to be piloted by a single person, who would lie prone in a harness beneath the wings. The pilot would use their arms and legs to power the machine's flapping motion, which would lift the wings and create the necessary lift to achieve flight. The ornithopter was also equipped with a rudimentary steering mechanism, which would allow the pilot to control the direction of flight. While Da Vinci's ornithopter was never built in his lifetime, it is considered a groundbreaking design that laid the groundwork for modern aviation. His observations of bird flight and his understanding of aerodynamics were well ahead of his time, and many of his ideas and concepts have been adapted and refined over the centuries to create the airplanes and helicopters that we know today. Today, replicas of Da Vinci's ornithopter can be seen in museums around the world, and his legacy as a pioneer of flight continues to inspire generations of engineers, inventors, and dreamers. Interestingly, other inventions of Leonardo da Vinci have reminded some of modern-day creations. For example, Leonardo da Vinci's helicopter is very similar in design to the Mars helicopter. There's an undeniable visual similarity between the two creations, and some have said that NASA may have used Leonardo da Vinci's creations in order to bring the Mars helicopter to life. Leonardo da Vinci created this machine over 400 years before the invention of the helicopter, and it's for this reason that many have said that he was ahead of his time. The Mars helicopter, also known as Ingenuity, is a small helicopter drone that was designed to fly on Mars. It was developed by NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and was sent to Mars aboard the Mars 2020 mission in July of the same year. The Mars helicopter is a technology demonstration mission designed to test the feasibility of using helicopters for future Mars exploration. How did the ancient Rapa Nui people move the Moai heads into place? The Moai heads, also known as Easter Island heads, are giant statues carved by the Rapa Nui people on Easter Island, located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The Moai heads range in size from 3 to 10 meters or 10 to 33 tall and can weigh up to 75 tons. One of the most fascinating mysteries surrounding the Moai heads is how the ancient Rapa Nui people were able to move these massive statues from the quarries where they were carved to their final positions on ceremonial platforms, known as ahu. There are several theories about how the Rapa Nui people moved the Moai heads into place, but the most widely accepted method is through the use of ropes, levers, and manpower. It is believed that the Rapa Nui people carved the Moai heads directly from the bedrock in the quarries using stone tools. Once the statues were completed, they were transported to their final location using a process called walking or parading. To move the Moai heads, the Rapa Nui people would first dig a trench in front of the statue and place 2 rows of logs in the trench. They would then rock the statue back and forth until it rested on the logs. The logs were then used as rollers to move the statue forward, with more logs being added to the back as the statue moved forward. The Rapa Nui people would also use ropes to pull the statue forward and levers to help control its movement. As the Moai heads approached their final destination on the ahu, they would be lifted into an upright position using a system of ramps and levers. Once in place, the Moai heads were often adorned with a topknot, or pukao, made of red scoria stone, which was quarried from a different location on the island. While the exact method used to move the Moai heads remains a subject of debate among archaeologists, it is clear that the Rapa Nui people were able to achieve this incredible feat of engineering using only the tools and resources available to them on the island. The Moai heads remain a testament to the ingenuity and skill of the ancient Rapa Nui people and continue to fascinate people around the world with their mysterious and awe-inspiring presence. The Moai statues of Easter Island are known for their enigmatic and imposing presence, but many people are unaware of the intricate carvings on their backs, known as petroglyphs. These petroglyphs are etched into the rough, volcanic stone of the Moai, and they offer a glimpse into the artistic and cultural traditions of the Rapa Nui people who created them. The petroglyphs found on the back of the Moai are primarily geometric shapes and designs, such as spirals, chevrons, and crescents. Some petroglyphs also depict human and animal figures, including birds, lizards, and even the occasional fish. The designs are believed to have been carved using stone tools and abrasive materials, such as sand and coral, and were likely created using a combination of incising and abrading techniques. The meaning behind these petroglyphs is still largely unknown, as there are no written records or oral traditions that describe their significance. Some researchers have suggested that the petroglyphs may represent celestial bodies or constellations, while others believe they may have had religious or spiritual significance. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Moai petroglyphs is their placement on the backs of the statues. As the Moai were designed to be viewed from the front, it is likely that the petroglyphs were intended for a select audience, perhaps only visible to those who were deemed worthy or initiated into certain cultural practices. This suggests that the petroglyphs may have played a role in the Rapa Nui's complex social and cultural structures. The Moai petroglyphs continue to fascinate visitors to Easter Island, offering a tantalizing glimpse into the artistic and cultural traditions of a people who left behind few written records. While their exact meaning may remain a mystery, their beauty and intricacy stand as a testament to the creativity and skill of the Rapa Nui people who created them. The Sphinx claws in Israel mystery. There is a mystery surrounding a pair of Sphinx claws that were discovered in the area of Tel Hazor in northern Israel in the 1950s. The claws are made of stone and are believed to be from a larger statue of a sphinx, similar to the one discovered in Tel Hazor in 2013. However, the original location of the sphinx from which the claws were believed to have come from remains unknown. It is possible that the statue was destroyed or dismantled at some point in history, and the pieces were scattered. Another theory is that the Sphinx was brought to Israel from Egypt as part of an exchange of gifts or diplomatic relations. It is believed that during the Late Bronze Age, around 1500 to 1200 BCE, there was significant contact and trade between the kingdoms of the Eastern Mediterranean, including Egypt, Canaan, and the Hittites. The Sphinx claws are currently on display at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, where they continue to intrigue and fascinate visitors. Their mysterious origins add to the allure of the ancient world and the many enigmas that continue to captivate historians and archaeologists. The mystery of the Lost Labyrinth of Egypt. The Lost Labyrinth of Egypt is a legendary ancient Egyptian maze-like structure that was said to be located near the Fayum Oasis, southwest of modern-day Cairo. The labyrinth was described by ancient authors such as Herodotus and Strabo, who claimed that it was an enormous structure with thousands of rooms and corridors, and that it was built by the legendary king Amenemhet III of the 12th dynasty around 1800 BCE. According to the ancient accounts, the labyrinth was built to serve as a tomb for the king, as well as a place of initiation for the priests and a center of wisdom and knowledge. The walls of the labyrinth were said to be covered with intricate carvings and inscriptions that contained the secrets of the universe and the mysteries of life and death. Despite the many accounts of the labyrinth, its exact location and even its existence have remained a mystery for centuries. Archaeologists have conducted numerous expeditions and excavations in the area, but have yet to uncover any definitive evidence of the labyrinth. In recent years, some researchers have suggested that the labyrinth may have been a metaphorical rather than a physical structure, representing the complex nature of the Egyptian religious and philosophical beliefs. Others believe that the labyrinth may have been destroyed or buried over time, or that it may still be hidden beneath the sands of the desert, waiting to be discovered. The Lost Labyrinth of Egypt continues to be a subject of fascination and speculation among historians, archaeologists, and enthusiasts of ancient Egyptian culture and mythology. Its mystery and enigma have captured the imagination of people for centuries and will likely continue to do so for many years to come. The Unknown Queen of Egypt. Kentekawes III is a little-known figure from ancient Egyptian history who is believed to have lived during the Old Kingdom period, around 2500 BCE. She is sometimes referred to as the Unknown Queen because her identity and the details of her reign are shrouded in mystery. The only evidence of Kentekawes III's existence comes from a small number of inscriptions and artifacts found in the pyramid complex of her son, Pharaoh Neferefre, who ruled for a brief period during the 5th dynasty. One of these inscriptions refers to Kentekawes III as Mother of the King and King's Wife, indicating that she held a position of high status and likely played an important role in the royal court. Despite the limited information available about Kentekawes III, some scholars have suggested that she may have been a regent or co-ruler during the early part of Neferefre's reign, as there is evidence that he may have ascended to the throne at a young age. Others have proposed that Kentekawes III may have been the mother of another 5th dynasty pharaoh, Shepseskare, although this is disputed. One of the most intriguing aspects of Kentekawes III's legacy is the discovery of a large alabaster statue in her honor, which depicts her seated on a throne with her arms crossed over her chest. The statue is notable for its high level of craftsmanship and attention to detail, and is considered one of the finest examples of Old Kingdom statuary. Despite the tantalizing clues about her life and reign, much about Kentekawes III remains a mystery, and her legacy continues to intrigue scholars and enthusiasts of ancient Egyptian history and culture. Why is there no mention of Nefertiti passing away? The reason why there is no mention of Queen Nefertiti's passing in Egyptian history is still a matter of speculation and debate among historians and Egyptologists. There are several possible explanations for this. She passed away during the reign of her husband, Akhenaten, and he may have deliberately erased any mention of her from official records in an attempt to suppress her memory and erase her influence. She may have outlived Akhenaten and ruled as a pharaoh in her own right for a short time after his passing, but her reign was brief and not significant enough to be recorded in official histories. Her demise may have occurred during a period of political upheaval or transition when the central authority of the pharaohs was weakened and official records were not properly maintained. She may have retired from public life and lived out the rest of her days in obscurity without any significant impact on Egyptian history. The burial place of Queen Nefertiti remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of ancient Egypt. Despite decades of excavations and searches, her tomb has never been definitively identified or located. There have been several theories and possible locations suggested for Nefertiti's tomb, including the Valley of the Kings, the Valley of the Queens, and the area around Amarna, where she and her husband, Akhenaten, had their capital city. Some experts believe that she may have been buried in a previously undiscovered tomb located within the royal necropolis at Amarna. In recent years, there have been several promising discoveries in the search for Nefertiti's tomb, including the discovery of a secret chamber in the tomb of Tutankhamun that some have speculated could be her final resting place. However, further investigations are needed to confirm this theory. Until her tomb is found, the exact location of Queen Nefertiti's burial remains a mystery, adding to the allure and fascination surrounding her legacy. The mystery of Vimanas. Vimanas are mythological flying palaces or chariots that are described in ancient Hindu texts such as the Vedas and the Mahabharata. According to these texts, the Vimanas were flying machines that were used by the gods and their human allies to travel through the sky and even into space. The descriptions of Vimanas in the Hindu texts vary, but they are generally described as large, cylindrical or disc-shaped vehicles with a dome-like top. They were said to be powered by various means, including the use of mercury, and were capable of traveling at great speeds and heights. Some texts describe Vimanas as having the ability to become invisible or to change shape, and some also suggest that they were equipped with weapons. There are many references to Vimanas in the Hindu texts, including stories of wars fought using these flying machines. The Mahabharata, for example, describes a battle in which the hero Arjuna rides a Vimana to fight his enemies in the sky. Another text, the Samarangana Sutradhara, describes the construction of Vimanas and includes detailed instructions for building them. While Vimanas are considered to be mythological in nature, some have suggested that they may have been based on ancient Indian technology or knowledge of aerodynamics. However, there is no concrete evidence to support these claims, and the Vimanas remain a fascinating and mysterious aspect of Hindu mythology. Leonardo da Vinci's robot. Leonardo da Vinci was not only a talented painter, but also a prolific inventor and engineer. One of his most famous creations is a humanoid robot known as the Robot Knight or Mechanical Knight. The Robot Knight was designed to be able to move and perform basic actions, such as standing up, sitting down, and moving its arms and legs. It was also designed to be able to move its head and jaw, and to be able to open and close its mouth. The robot was powered by a series of cables and pulleys, which were connected to a system of weights and counterweights. As the weights were moved, the cables would pull on the robot's limbs, causing it to move. One of the most remarkable features of the Robot Knight was its ability to move its fingers independently. This was achieved using a complex system of gears and rods, which allowed the fingers to move up and down and to grip and release objects. While the Robot Knight was never actually built during Leonardo's lifetime, it is believed that he created detailed plans and sketches for the machine, which were later discovered among his notes and drawings. Leonardo's robot is considered to be an important precursor to modern robotics, and it remains a testament to his incredible creativity and ingenuity as an inventor and engineer. The mystery of the lost land of Punt. The lost land of Punt is an ancient African kingdom or region that is mentioned in various Egyptian texts and inscriptions from the 25th century BC until the 13th century BC. The precise location of Punt is not clear, but it is believed to have been situated in the region of the Horn of Africa, possibly in present-day Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, or Yemen. According to the ancient Egyptian records, Punt was a land rich in gold, frankincense, myrrh, exotic animals, and other valuable commodities. The Egyptians conducted several expeditions to Punt during the Old and Middle Kingdom periods, as attested by inscriptions and reliefs on the walls of temples and tombs. The expedition to Punt was led by high-ranking officials, such as the vizier, the treasurer, or the overseer of the royal harem, and involved a large fleet of ships and thousands of crew members and soldiers. The journey to Punt was long and perilous, as it involved navigating the Red Sea, crossing deserts, and negotiating with local tribes and traders. The Egyptians traded with the people of Punt for exotic goods, such as myrrh trees, ebony wood, ivory tusks, leopard skins, and live baboons, among others. The Puntites, in turn, received goods from Egypt, such as linen, beads, metal tools, and pottery. Despite the numerous expeditions to Punt, the precise location and identity of the Puntites remained a mystery to the Egyptians. The Puntites were depicted in the reliefs and inscriptions as having dark skin, curly hair, and wearing animal skins or simple garments. Some scholars have suggested that the Puntites may have been related to the modern-day Cushitic or Semitic-speaking peoples of East Africa or the Arabian Peninsula. The exact reason for the decline and disappearance of Punt is not known, but it is believed to have been due to environmental changes, economic factors, or political upheavals. The legacy of Punt lives on in the Egyptian texts and art, which depict the exotic and mysterious land as a source of wealth and wonder. The mysterious sea serpent encounter of 1639. The sea serpent of Cape Ann is one of the earliest recorded accounts of a sea serpent sighting in America. In August 1639, a fishing vessel near Cape Ann, Massachusetts, reported an encounter with a strange and frightening sea creature. According to the account, the serpent was about 40 feet long and had a head like a horse, with great eyes. It also had a tapering tail and rough, scaly skin. The serpent attacked the fishing boat, wrapping its powerful body around the hull and attempting to capsize the vessel. The fishermen fought back with oars and poles, eventually driving the creature away. The incident was reported in the Massachusetts Bay Colony records, and the account of the serpent was widely circulated, sparking public fascination with sea monsters and contributing to the lore of American maritime history. While there have been many other reported sightings of sea serpents throughout history, the account of the Cape Ann sea serpent is notable for its early date and the fact that it was recorded in official colonial records. Some have speculated that the creature may have been a giant oarfish, a rare deep-sea fish that can grow up to 36 feet long and is known to occasionally swim near the surface. The mystery of Todd Hofflander. Considered to be one of the most bizarre disappearances of recent years, the vanishing of a 39-year-old experienced outdoorsman by the name of Todd Hofflander from the Seven Devils area of Idaho has become a popular case amongst missing 411 investigators. According to the events surrounding the case, it would be on the 27th of September, back in 2010, that Todd Hofflander would go out for a short 4-day hiking trip with a good friend of his, when he would suddenly be reported missing less than a few hours into the trip. The area where Todd Hofflander and his hiking partner would journey to was known as the Seven Devils area of Idaho, a wide-open location difficult for someone to have gone missing in. The region possessed little to no vegetation and was located high in elevation, making it easy for airplanes or helicopters to spot missing hikers. Additionally, the spot where Todd and his hiking partner were walking had a lot of exposed rock and dirt, making it much easier for their brightly colored clothes to be seen from the air. As can be expected, it would come as a terrible surprise to everyone involved when Todd Hofflander would not only suddenly go missing in a short span of time, but would never be recovered, even after weeks of searching. According to Todd's hiking partner, the two men started their trip up the mountain following paved hiking trails that stretched up to the highest summit of the area. Joining the two men was also Todd's black Labrador, Ruby, who seemed playful and excited to be on the hiking trip. After hiking for several hours, Todd would complain to his hiking partner that his knee had become incredibly sore. Although it was never explained if Todd's sore knee was caused by the hike itself or was due to an old injury or disability, the hiking partner would later tell investigators that it would be due to Todd's bad knee that Todd would decide to return back downhill and meet back up with his friend at a later time at the base of the river, where the two men had decided to make camp earlier in the day. The hiking partner would also tell investigators that he didn't believe that the sore knee was a serious issue, as there had been countless times when Todd Hofflander had made comments about his knees when hiking in the past, and were often nothing more than a stiffness or general discomfort. After spending several more hours at the peak of the Seven Devils Mountain, Todd's hiking partner would slowly make his way back down the mountain shortly before the sun had set. As he approached the river where the two men had promised to later meet up and establish a primitive campsite, the hiking partner quickly realized that Todd was nowhere to be found in the area. Although the hiking partner would later tell investigators that splitting up during their hiking trips was common for the two men, he would have a terrible feeling that something was far out of the ordinary, and so would quickly contact local United States Forest Services and the local county sheriff's department to conduct a missing persons search for Todd Hofflander by late evening. Several dozen volunteers from the Sheriff's Department and agents from the United States Forest Service would spend the night combing the area for Todd Hofflander, alongside close friends and family members, yet no sign of the missing 39-year-old man or his dog Ruby were ever discovered. The use of emergency aircraft would also prove to be of little help, as no sign of Todd Hofflander was reported from the skies, even with the use of advanced thermal imaging technology and night vision cameras to scan the area for any signs of body heat. It was almost as if Todd Hofflander had completely vanished from the entire region. Search and rescue volunteers would also grow increasingly concerned due to the plummeting temperatures of the mountain and the high elevation, making it difficult for even a well-insulated individual to have stayed warm through the night. It would be on the second day of Todd's disappearance that investigators would get a witness report from a passing hiker who claimed to have seen Todd Hofflander while he had been resting at the McCaffrey Cow Camp, located at the halfway point between the mountain's summit and the base of the river where Todd and his hiking partner had planned to meet. According to the hiker, Todd had passed through McCaffrey Cow Camp and stayed there to rest a while before continuing on his journey. Using the McCaffrey Cow Camp as Todd's last known location, search and rescue teams would radiate outward from the spot in organized grid-like search patterns in the hopes of locating Todd or any of his belongings. Oddly enough, after another 2 weeks of searching, investigators and search and rescue volunteers were unable to find any sign of Todd, Ruby, or any of his belongings. After a total of 15 days of trying to locate the missing 39-year-old, investigators would call off the search for Todd, believing that he must have completely left the area and was most likely no longer within the national park. Several theories would soon be claimed by investigators, including the possibility that Todd had decided to purposefully abandon his family to start a new life, as he left behind 2 children and his wife. Another widely accepted possibility is believed that Todd may have been attacked by a large animal, as bears are commonly found in the state and could have been responsible for his disappearance. However, even if that was the case, Todd's belongings should have been located within the area, yet despite searching for several square miles from where Todd had last been seen, there was little to no evidence of animal attacks or locating any of Todd's items. News surrounding the missing pair would not come forward until another 3 days had passed from the termination of search efforts. According to reports, it would be on the 15th of October that a group of hikers passing through the area would find a black Labrador dog that would later be confirmed by Todd's wife as being Ruby. The hikers would claim to have found the dog while passing through the eastern slopes of the Seven Devils Mountain, the same area where Todd Hofflander was believed to have last been seen. In a bizarre turn of events for investigators, despite having been missing for more than 18 days, Ruby would be found in perfect health, as well as in good moods, as if she had been fed routinely while she was missing. Todd's wife would tell investigators that Todd and Ruby had always been inseparable, and that if Ruby was found in the area, then Todd must have also still been in the area. Seeing Ruby's health as a good sign for Todd's well-being, the search for Todd Hofflander would continue once more. Unfortunately for investigators and Todd's family, despite another week of searching, no sign of Todd was ever located, and the official search into the missing 39-year-old would be terminated. Todd's wife, Julie Hofflander, would spend the following weeks talking with several different news sources, begging for more volunteers to help her find her missing husband during an informal search lasting for an unknown period of time. Julie would also tell reporters that she was confused by the lack of any recovered materials. She would tell reports that they found no traces of anything. She said she shared sentiments that something far more unusual had taken place than just a possible hiking accident or animal attack. Today, rumors of a supernatural attack circulate through the area as local superstitious legends claim the region where Todd had disappeared, known as the Hell's Canyon Wilderness, is filled with stories of supernatural occurrences and strange sightings. Even more strange, the closest geographic landmarks to where Todd had disappeared all shared names and legends of superstitious and supernatural events, such as the Devil Lake, Purgatory Lake, Devil's Throne Ridge, and the Seven Devils Lake. An update was made on this case. According to very few news sources, nearly 10 years later, remains were found. After conducting tests in late January 2021, DNA results confirmed they belonged to Todd Hofflander. The mystery of Patty Krieger. It would be during late October of 2010 that a missing persons report would be filed in the Cascade Mountains near the Washington town of Rockport on the Sauk Mountain Trail. According to a group of Patty's friends, Patty Krieger and her boyfriend, Larry Presley, had been suffering from quite a few emotional setbacks in recent months. In the span of only a few short months, both of Larry's parents would pass away, shortly after the other, causing several financial hardships for Patty and Larry at the time. Eventually, the couple would decide to cremate the parents and spread their ashes along the Washington Cascade Mountains for a funeral. Although the friends were unsure exactly why Larry and Patty chose the Cascade Mountains to spread the ashes, the group assumed that the location must have held significant meaning to Larry's parents. It would be on the early morning of the 2nd of October that 65-year-old Patty Krieger, Larry Presley, their friends, Nicole Gander, Troy Robinson, Chrissy Baumgartner, and Matt Robinson would all make the drive together and arrive at the height of Sauk Mountain Road. The road is a small winding trail that brings drivers up to an elevation of around 4,400 feet, roughly only 1,000 feet shy of the Sauk Mountain summit elevation, which rests at around 5,500 feet. Given the fact that the walk to the summit of the mountain was expected to have been a short one, with the funeral lasting less than an hour or so, Patty decided to also bring her Rottweiler dog, named Bear. The trail going up from the road to the top of the mountain was remarked by friends as being a pretty steep, direct trail, nearly impossible to miss when traveling up the mountain, and even more difficult to get lost on. They had assumed that had anyone in the area been lost, it would have been easy to reorient themselves using the trail and following the peak of the mountain to find where the cars had been parked. Additionally, on the opposite side of the mountain rested Sauk Lake, which sat at an elevation of only 4,000 feet, making it easy to see and gauge direction from. After reaching the peak of the mountain, the group would spend about an hour or so on the summit, talking about Larry Presley's parents and consoling one another before spreading the ashes across the area. Once finished, the group decided to travel all together back down the trail towards their vehicles. Halfway down the trail, Patty Krieger would notice a fork on the trail that would lead down in a different direction from the pathway they had taken. Curious as to where the trail would go, Patty would tell the other members of the group that she had wanted to spend a few minutes exploring the second trail for a bit and would return to the vehicles shortly after. At first, members of the group were reluctant to let Patty travel on her own, as the trail appeared to lead into an area with many old, overgrown trees, and Patty Krieger suffered from a hearing condition that left her afflicted with partial deafness. However, after the group got her attention, Patty seemed unwilling to continue with the group and intimated that she would catch up with the rest of them later, deciding to bring Bear with her down the trail to explore further. Due to the fact that Larry would reassure the group that Patty was fine and had charged up her hearing aids earlier that morning, the group capitulated and decided to wait at the parking area until Patty returned. It would be during this time from around 10 in the morning to about 1 in the afternoon, the group would wait at their vehicles and spend the time talking and catching up before realizing that Patty had been gone for far longer than was expected. Worried that something bad had happened, the group immediately contacted the Skagit County Sheriff's Office and reported Patty Krieger as a missing person. The call would be made shortly after 1 in the afternoon on the 2nd of October. Due to the plummeting late-night temperatures in the area, search and rescue teams were quick to organize and use state-of-the-art technology to help recover Patty Krieger. Within an hour, the sheriff's officer would gather together several dozen search and rescue volunteers, several military aircraft equipped with infrared cameras capable of picking up thermal imaging, and Patty Krieger's friends and family combing the entirety of the Sauk Mountain. Patty's friend group would also lead search and rescue volunteers to the trail where Patty had last been seen, following the pathway for several hours while calling out for Patty Krieger. Despite the large number of volunteers and high-tech aircraft in the region, however, no sign or sound of Patty Krieger or Bear the dog would be recovered. It would be on the following day of the search, on the 3rd of October, that a strange lead would soon surface. According to Patty's son, Alan Patterson, while walking in an area more than 10 miles from where Patty had last been seen, Alan claimed to have heard what he believed was the sound of a dog barking and growling, believing the sound to have come from Patty's dog, Bear. As he was looking around for the source of the sound, unfortunately, Alan was unable to figure out where the dog could have been barking from. After circling the area, Alan would claim that the sound of the dog almost sounded as if it emanated from above him, somewhere in an empty point in the sky. Later, Alan would remark that the sound seemed to be coming from below the ridge where he was standing. Even after spending more than an hour in the area looking for the source of the sound, soon the dog would stop barking and Alan would lose all trace of where the dog could have been. Although follow-up searches would continue in the area surrounding where Alan had encountered the sounds, the search and rescue teams would have to soon look in other areas after failing to find any sign of Patty or Bear. However, the most peculiar aspect of the follow-up searches appeared to be from the bizarre response from several canine search and rescue teams that were brought to the region to help track the scent of Patty Krieger or Bear. When brought to the trail of where Patty Krieger has last been seen, or to the area where Alan Patterson believed to hear the sound of a dog growling and barking, the canine teams would suddenly become unwilling and unresponsive to efforts at tracking or picking up a scent. The most bizarre aspect of this would come forward when the dogs, capable of finding and tracking the scent of others, would suddenly stop any efforts when tasked or given an item with Patty's scent. It would be after another 72 hours of non-stop searching that the Skagit County Sheriff's Office would formally announce that the search for Patty Krieger would be terminated after failing to find any sign of her anywhere near the mountain. Search and rescue volunteers would later theorize that Patty must have assumed that the path she had been taking would eventually lead back to the road where the vehicles had been parked and could have been following it for several miles before realizing that she was lost or injured. Despite the official search coming to an end, Alan Patterson and several friends and family would continue to go to the mountains, sometimes staying over the course of weekends, to continue the search for Patty Krieger. Unfortunately, even after another 3 weeks of these private search efforts, nothing notable would surface surrounding Patty's disappearance. It would not be until the 28th of October that news would come forward in the shape of a Rockport resident recovering a Rottweiler that they had spotted walking through the mountains. The dog was originally described as having been incredibly malnourished and underweight, but seemed strong enough to have been wandering through the area looking for food. Immediately, the resident would take the dog to a local veterinarian, where it would be discovered that the dog was, in fact, Patty Krieger's dog, Bear. After being put on a special diet to get his energy back, Bear would make a full recovery. Hoping to not waste any more time, the family, alongside the original search and rescue teams, would take Bear back to the area where Patty had last been seen by her friends, believing that the dog would help lead investigators back to Patty Krieger. Oddly enough, just like the other canine search and rescue teams, Bear seemed unwilling to track Patty's location and would fail to find any scent in the area. Even after walking Bear throughout the trails, he seemed unreactive to the region. Investigators were puzzled by this, due to the fact that many of the trained canine search and rescue dogs were trained to sniff out the specific smells of human remains, and that Bear should have been able to find the location of where Patty had last been seen since they had disappeared together in the same area. Had she been injured and stuck in a single location, Bear or the canines should have been able to find her position. Despite the lack of help in searching, the recovery of Patty's dog left investigators extremely hopeful that Patty's remains were still left somewhere in the park. They would argue that it seemed highly unlikely that Bear would be able to survive for 26 days without any food or fresh water, so it was highly likely that Bear was able to find a safe place to eat and drink over the course of the last 26 days. Even more surprising, investigators were curious as to how none of them had come across the dog throughout their search, believing that it could have been possible that Patty and the dog were in an area making it difficult for them to hear any passerbyers or overhead aircraft. If that was the case, they believed that it could have been possible that Patty had been taking cover in an enclosed area, like a cave or ravine, and search efforts had failed to find her close by. Additionally, it seemed likely that Alan had actually heard the barking and growling of Bear where he claimed to have encountered it, as Bear was later discovered in an area close by. Still, there were way too many factors that made it difficult to know for a fact if Patty and Bear had disappeared together, or if something far more sinister had taken place. It seemed unlikely that Patty would have travelled so far away from the trail, where Bear was later recovered. After several more weeks of searching, all efforts at locating Patty Krieger would come to a complete standstill after no further sign of her would be made. To this day, Patty's son, Alan Patterson, will occasionally visit the site of where his mother had last been seen, and still hopes that any sign of her will be recovered. Unsolved mysteries can be intriguing to people for several reasons. First, they often involve unusual or mysterious events that defy easy explanation. This can be fascinating because it challenges our understanding of the world around us and makes us wonder what else we don't know. Second, unsolved mysteries can capture our imagination and inspire curiosity. They invite us to explore and investigate, to dig deeper and uncover the truth behind the mystery. The mystery of the Orang Pendek. Orang Pendek, also known as the short person or little person in Indonesian, is a mysterious humanoid that is said to inhabit the dense rainforests of Sumatra, Indonesia. It's described as a small, bipedal ape-like creature that stands around 3 to 5 feet tall and is covered in dark fur. The Orang Pendek has been sighted by the local people for centuries, but only in recent years has it gained attention from explorers around the world. Eyewitnesses describe it as a very agile creature, able to move quickly through the trees and disappear into the dense underbrush with ease. There have been numerous sightings and encounters with the Orang Pendek, but no concrete evidence has been found to prove its existence. However, many locals believe in its existence, and some have even claimed to have interacted with it on a personal level. The strangest observation is that these creatures have facial features that closely match those of a human instead of a monkey, which has resulted in the belief that the Orang Pendek could be a distant, lost human cousin, possibly with a common ancestor. A group of archaeologists studying the area found remains of a small species that was human-like and reported them as Homo floresiensis. From what the locals of Indonesia say, the Orang Pendek has high intelligence and can hide from being detected while watching people, making them fear it for its clever nature. One native reported his encounter, saying that the creature lifted its arms to stand with the intention of threatening him, which is an ape's natural instinct to intimidate threats. Other encounters have reported the same, but no cases of attacks have been reported. Debbie Marter, a former British journalist and researcher, decided to investigate the creature. Back in 1944, she travelled to the Sumatra jungles in the hopes of discovering the creature. Although she wasn't able to photograph the creature, she was certain that she had seen an animal that was very similar and matched the descriptions of the Orang Pendek. Despite extensive efforts by researchers to locate and study the creature, the Orang Pendek remains elusive, and its existence continues to be shrouded in mystery. The mysterious Bat Squatch. The Bat Squatch is a mysterious creature that's currently not recognized by scientists, or a creature that is claimed to exist but has not been scientifically proven, that is said to inhabit the Pacific Northwest region of the United States. It is described as a large, flying creature that is similar in appearance to a bat, but also possesses features of a primate, such as long arms and a human-like face. Sightings of the Bat Squatch date back to the 1980s and have been reported in various locations in Washington state, particularly in the Mount St. Helens area. Witnesses describe the creature as being between 4 to 9 feet tall, with a wingspan of up to 50 feet, covered in dark fur, and having sharp claws and teeth. The origins of the Bat Squatch legend are unclear, but some suggest that it may have been inspired by Native American folklore or by reports of similar cryptids, such as the Jersey Devil or the Mothman. Despite numerous sightings and reports, no concrete evidence of the Bat Squatch's existence has ever been found, and some skeptics suggest that it may be a misidentification of known animals or a hoax perpetuated by pranksters. Nonetheless, the legend of the Bat Squatch continues to capture the imagination of cryptozoology enthusiasts and those fascinated by the mysteries of the natural world. The mystery of how the East Bay Walls were constructed. The East Bay Walls are a series of massive stone walls located in the Andes Mountains near Lake Titicaca in modern-day Bolivia. The walls are constructed of large megalithic stones that weigh up to 130 tons each and were fitted together with remarkable precision. The East Bay Walls are believed to have been built by the Tiwanaku civilization, a pre-Columbian civilization that flourished in the Andean region from 400 to 1000 AD. The Tiwanaku people were known for their advanced engineering and construction techniques, and the East Bay Walls are a testament to their ingenuity. The walls were likely used for a variety of purposes, including as fortifications, irrigation systems, and terraced agriculture. The exact purpose of the walls is still a subject of debate among archaeologists and historians. The construction of the East Bay Walls is a remarkable achievement, especially given the limited technology and resources available to the Tiwanaku people. It is not known exactly how they were able to transport and lift the massive stones used in the walls, but it is believed that they used a combination of ramps, rollers, and sledges to move the stones into position. The precise fitting of the stones suggests that the Tiwanaku people had a deep understanding of geometry and mathematics, and may have used sophisticated measuring and leveling tools to ensure that the walls were perfectly aligned. The mysterious U-28 creature. The U-28 creature is a mysterious creature that was encountered in 1915 by the crew of the German submarine U-28 during World War I. According to the accounts, the crew of the U-28 reported seeing a massive creature with a long neck and a small head, similar in appearance to a prehistoric plesiosaur or a sea serpent. The creature reportedly measured around 60 feet in length, and its head was estimated to be about 6 feet long. As the U-28 approached the creature, the crew noticed that it had a dark, scaly skin and was covered in barnacles. According to the reports surrounding the creature, the encounter occurred on the 30th of July back in 1950, when a German U-boat commander, known as Commander Freiherr George G. von Forstner, wrote a detailed report following his attack against the British steamer the Iberian, claiming that after the steamer sank, there appeared to be a large aquatic animal described as being approximately 60 to 80 feet in length and similar to that as a large crocodile. The report is quoted as stating the following: "At that moment, I had with me in the conning tower 6 of my officers of the watch, including the chief engineer, the navigator, and the helmsman. Simultaneously, we all drew one another's attention to this wonder of the seas, which was writhing and struggling among the debris. We were unable to identify the creature, but all of us agreed that it resembled an aquatic crocodile, which was about 60 feet long, with 4 limbs resembling large webbed feet, a long pointed tail, and a head which also tapered to a point. Unfortunately, we were not able to take a photograph, for the animal sank out of sight after 10 or 15 seconds." End quote. Researchers believe reports of the U-28 monster directly matches the whale-eater creatures of centuries-old encounters. Over the past 8 centuries, consistent sightings of a creature known as the whale-eater have been made all across the world, with notable sightings being made well into the modern day. The creature has been described as being an estimated 43 feet in length, having an elongated head, a short neck, a crocodile-like body, 4 flippers for locomotion, and a short tail. Since the 13th century, sailors have claimed fantastic stories of massive sea monsters that are known for hunting down and eating whales of all sizes. Researchers have speculated that the whale-eater is a surviving member of the Pliosaurus marine reptile species that was estimated to have gone extinct about 65 million years ago. With its crocodile-like appearance, the whale-eater would more than accurately fit the description of the pliosaur and would explain the large number of sightings made throughout history. Additionally, on the 13th of August 2012, a 65-foot whale was found beached on the sandy coast of St. Austell. Before efforts could be made to assist the whale, the creature suddenly passed away. When experts analysed the whale, they found that there were deep gashes all across the creature's face that looked eerily like a massive single bite mark, with the teeth-like punctures curving evenly into a U-shape across the whale's entire face. One of the reports was quoted as saying the following: "Based on the photographic evidence, a creature with huge, long, crocodile-shaped jaws lined with big, sharp teeth attacked the whale." End quote. While there have been many theories put forward to explain the U-28 creature, including the possibility of a misidentified whale or other known sea creature, its true identity remains a mystery. The encounter has been the subject of much speculation and fascination among researchers, and it continues to be a popular topic of discussion among those interested in the unknown and the unexplained. The pyramids of Giza are one giant mystery. Referred to as the last standing monument, once regarded as being a part of the 7 wonders of the world, the ancient Great Pyramids of Giza have captured the world by attention, given their sheer mystery as to their creation, their creators, their purpose, and their design. A number of these mysteries, despite researchers trying to explain such theories for more than a few centuries, have yet to be explained. The Great Pyramid of Giza is estimated to be made up of around 2.3 million stone blocks. The weight of the blocks varies, with some weighing as much as 80 tons, while others are as small as a few pounds. The total weight of the pyramid is estimated to be around 6.5 million tons. The discovery of a swivel door. Researchers have used a number of modern-day technological breakthroughs to better understand a number of nearly impossible-to-detect anomalies surrounding the Great Pyramids at Giza, and believe they have found evidence of a new find that connects the pyramids to that of older Egyptian pharaohs, Sneferu and Huni. According to the work of Zahi Hawass, Egyptologists were attempting to clean out a large portion of the natural buildup of dust all along the hallways of the pyramid, and so worked alongside a number of robotics manufacturers in an attempt to establish and construct large fans throughout the pyramid that would help aerate the area and suck out a large portion of the dust throughout the pyramid's halls and rooms. This led to the research team deploying a number of experimental robotic devices that journeyed all throughout the Great Pyramid of Giza and discovered a number of impossible-to-explain anomalies across tiny shafts that were discovered all throughout a number of chambers and passageways. When the small robotic device went into the shafts, it discovered tiny doors that would have been impossible for any person to have opened or used, and yet, there they were. Interestingly enough, researchers recounted original stories in which grave robbers detailed a story that the pyramids of Giza held a large hidden swivel door that was balanced so perfectly that it could be opened only from the inside with a small push. However, once outside, the swivel door closed to such a perfect and precise size that it would be nearly impossible to see from the outside. Though evidence of the large swivel door has yet to surface, the new finds from the small robotic discoveries leads researchers to believe that it might very well be true that there are even more hidden chambers surrounding the structure that could hold a number of hidden doors into even more hidden passageways. Unfortunately, the Egyptian government holds so many regulations surrounding the massive structure that the researchers attempting to better understand where these hidden chambers might lay first need approval from the government to begin any testing, forcing researchers to first know where the hidden doors are before beginning their search for them. Many are unaware that they can tell time. The Great Pyramid of Giza has been found to have astronomical alignments and could be used to tell time with a high degree of accuracy. The pyramid is aligned in such a way that its four faces are precisely oriented to the cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west. This means that the pyramid casts a shadow in a predictable way as the sun moves across the sky during the day. In addition, the internal chambers and passages of the pyramid are also aligned with astronomical features, such as the positions of certain stars and constellations. For example, the narrow passage known as the air shaft in the king's chamber points directly to the star Sirius, which was an important star in ancient Egyptian religion and culture. The Great Pyramid also contains a number of mathematical and geometric features that suggest the ancient Egyptians had a sophisticated understanding of astronomy and timekeeping. For example, the pyramid's height and base length are in a ratio that closely approximates the value of pi, a mathematical constant that describes the relationship between the circumference and diameter of a circle. While the Great Pyramid was not designed specifically as a timekeeping device, it is clear that the ancient Egyptians who built it had a deep understanding of astronomy and the movement of celestial bodies, and that they may have used the pyramid to track the passage of time and the seasons. The unexplained heat anomalies. One of the strangest mysteries surrounding the pyramids that researchers are facing in the modern day has to be that of the impossible to explain heat anomalies that seem to pocket all across the pyramid in varying degrees that seem to not make any logical sense. Discovered back in November of 2015, researchers used a number of technological devices, including thermal imaging devices, that scanned all around the Great Pyramids of Giza in an attempt to uncover even more secrets of the structure. It appears that these experiments succeeded as the researchers found pockets of areas that heated or cooled at different rates than other areas. The current working theory is that these pockets of heat are caused by secret passages and hidden chambers. This is due to the fact that pockets filled with air will hold and trap in more heat than if the area was completely filled with a solid rock. The research team noted that there was a particularly impressive anomaly located on the eastern side of the Khufu pyramid at the ground level. Given the Khufu pyramid's large size and the anomalous property of the heating, researchers have theorized that the area must be the size of a small passageway that leads down into the ground underneath the pyramid to an undiscovered level. Unfortunately, researchers are unable to find a way to enter the hidden passageways and are barred from attempting any methods of excavation that could damage the structure to enter inside the pyramid, leaving these heat anomalies to remain a mystery for the foreseeable future. The mystery of the lost treasure of Blackbeard. The lost treasure of Blackbeard, also known as Edward Teach, is one of the most sought-after treasures in history. Blackbeard was a notorious pirate who operated in the Caribbean during the early 18th century. He is believed to have amassed a significant amount of treasure during his career, but most of it remains missing to this day. According to legend, Blackbeard buried his treasure on an island near his base of operations in North Carolina, USA. The treasure is said to consist of gold, silver, jewels, and other valuable items that Blackbeard looted from ships during his raids. Despite numerous attempts to locate the treasure over the years, it remains undiscovered. Some historians believe that the treasure may never have existed, or that Blackbeard may have taken it with him when he was taken out in battle by British naval forces in 1718. However, many treasure hunters continue to search for Blackbeard's treasure, using a variety of methods including metal detectors, sonar, and historical research. Some believe that the treasure may have been hidden in a network of tunnels beneath Ocracoke Island, which was a major hub of Blackbeard's operations. Despite the efforts of many treasure hunters, the location of Blackbeard's treasure remains a mystery, and it is unlikely that it will ever be found. Nevertheless, the legend of Blackbeard and his lost treasure continues to captivate people's imaginations, and the search for it continues to this day. The mystery of Captain Kidd's treasure. Captain William Kidd was a Scottish sailor and privateer in the late 17th century who is famous for his alleged treasure. Kidd was hired by the British government to capture enemy ships and was also given permission to attack any pirates he encountered. However, Kidd himself became a pirate and began attacking ships belonging to anyone, including British vessels. Kidd's downfall came when he mistakenly attacked a British East India Company ship, the Quedagh Merchant, which was carrying valuable cargo belonging to powerful people in India. Kidd was later captured and sent to London for trial, where he was found guilty of piracy and sentenced to his demise. It was rumoured that Kidd had buried treasure in various locations, including islands in the Caribbean and along the coast of New England. However, the most famous of these legends is the treasure that is said to be buried on Gardiner's Island, located off the coast of Long Island, New York. The legend of Captain Kidd's treasure has been passed down for generations, and many treasure hunters have attempted to find it. However, no one has been able to locate the treasure to this day. Some believe that the treasure was never actually buried on Gardiner's Island, while others believe that it has already been found and kept secret. In 2007, a team of archaeologists searched for Kidd's treasure on Gardiner's Island, but they found no evidence of it. Despite this, the legend of Captain Kidd's treasure continues to fascinate people and inspire treasure hunters to this day. The mystery of the Monkey Man of New Delhi. The Monkey Man of New Delhi was a mysterious creature that reportedly attacked and injured numerous people in the Indian capital city of New Delhi in 2001. The creature was described as being about 4 feet tall, covered in dark hair, and having a monkey-like face and glowing red eyes. It was said to be capable of scaling walls and jumping over buildings. The first reported sighting of the Monkey Man occurred in May 2001, and over the next few months, hundreds of people claimed to have seen the creature or been attacked by it. Some reported that it had scratched or bitten them, while others said they had been paralyzed by its gaze. Panic and fear spread throughout the city, and people began to take precautions such as sleeping on their roofs or arming themselves with sticks. The Indian government launched an investigation into the phenomenon, but despite conducting numerous searches and employing traps and teams of experts, they were unable to find any evidence of the creature. Skeptics suggested that the Monkey Man sightings were simply mass hysteria, fueled by rumors and urban legends. The Monkey Man of New Delhi ultimately faded from public consciousness, and no one was ever able to definitively explain the phenomenon. The incident remains a mystery to this day. The number of missing persons each year can vary depending on the location and the criteria used to define a missing person. In the United States, for example, the National Crime Information Center reported 609,000 missing persons in 2020, which is the most recent year for which data is available. However, it is important to note that this figure includes both juveniles and adults, and includes cases in which the person was quickly found or returned home. Of the reported missing persons, the the vast majority are located or returned home within a short period of time. According to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, an estimated 600,000 to 900,000 people go missing in the United States every year. The vast majority of these individuals are located within a few days or weeks, and many of the remaining cases are eventually resolved. These are just the people who get reported as missing, and some researchers have suggested that the numbers are much higher. The mysterious case of Eddie Grant. Back in 1949, on the 5th of October, a 22-year-old man by the name of Eddie Grant would suddenly vanish in the late afternoon hours while on a hunting trip with two of his close friends, William McMahon and Bill Young. In an almost strange development, the disappearance of Eddie Grant would initially be suspicious enough that local authorities would immediately pursue the vanishing of Eddie Grant and begin investigating and putting pressure on Eddie's close friends, relatives, and any hikers or campers that had been passing through the area at the time. However, after the discovery of Eddie Grant, nearly all efforts at pursuing the investigation would come to a complete stop, despite the plethora of new evidence that seemed almost impossible to explain. It's for this reason that the case of Eddie Grant is often described by paranormal investigators as a possible cover-up for something far more strange. According to the report, the three friends traveled to the Nez Perce National Forest together, located only 30 miles east of the small town of Grangeville, Idaho, for a short hunting trip that was expected to last only a few days. However, during that first day, William McMahon and Bill Young were at their campsite when Eddie Grant told them that he had wanted to spend the first day hunting on his own. After preparing his gear, Eddie Grant would leave the two others during the early morning and set out on his own in the area. Although the two others remarked that Eddie's behavior seemed rather strange, they were not worried about Eddie's safety, as he had often hunted alone plenty of times in the past. Despite being a fairly young age, at only 22 years old, Eddie had more hunting and outdoors experience than both of his friends combined. Oddly enough, as the hours of the day grew late and nightfall approached, Eddie's friends began to worry that something far more nefarious had occurred. After the sun had set, and Eddie Grant still had not yet returned, his two friends would quickly contact the local law enforcement agencies and National Forest Park Services to report the disappearance of Eddie Grant. Within the hour of the report having been made, a massive team of search and rescue volunteers were already in the area, including law enforcement agents, national park staff, and a huge group from the Idaho National Guard. In a rather bizarre turn of events, the Idaho National Guard would soon take charge of the search and rescue operations, alongside a team of military personnel from the nearby town of Lewiston, Idaho. On the first night of the disappearance, several military aircraft would fly over the area to help perform assistant aerial reconnaissance, helping to cover fast open areas while equipped with state-of-the-art thermal imaging technologies. By that following morning, a team of bloodhounds were on the scene and helped to cover a 4-mile radius from the campsite in an effort to find Eddie Grant's scent, but were unable to pick up any sign of the missing 22-year-old. It would be after the failure of the canines that law enforcement would begin to publicly change their stance on the disappearance of Eddie Grant and come forward with the claims that investigators were pursuing a possible suspicious case. On the 17th of October, 12 days after the disappearance of Eddie Grant, an article would be published in the local Lewiston newspaper, the Lewiston Morning Tribune, claiming that the Grangeville County Sheriff's Department was pursuing evidence of foul play. Additionally, the Sheriff's Department would make the public statement saying, "The region where Grant was last seen, near Baldy Mountain, about 30 miles east of here, is country a man could easily walk out of," with the department essentially expressing disbelief that Grant could have been lost in the open terrain that should have been easy to reorient himself from using the mountain as a guiding point. By this point in the investigation, many of the search and rescue volunteers felt that something incredibly unusual had happened to Eddie Grant, and that resources could better be used elsewhere, causing the search and rescue operations to slow and come to an almost complete halt. Despite the official search for Eddie Grant slowing down, Grant's close friends and family would continue an unofficial search for Eddie, following areas where they believed the 22-year-old would have traveled. It would be on the 39th day of Eddie's disappearance during mid-November that Eddie's friends would discover him at the edge of an unnamed creek located only a mile and a half away from their hunting campsite. An article published in the Spokesman Review newspaper would talk about the incident on the 16th of November, a day following the discovery of Eddie. The article would write that the three people who found Eddie Grant were his two brothers, Marvin and Milton Grant, and a close family friend by the name of Earl P. According to the three men, Eddie was found face down and appeared to have tripped over a large tree limb. However, even more strange was that many of Eddie's items were missing, including his rifle, his hat, his hunting equipment, and his leather chaps. Despite Eddie's rifle having been missing, searchers would discover an 8mm expended cartridge less than a mile from where he was found, as if Eddie had fired off a round but then lost his rifle shortly after. Even more peculiar, it appeared as if Eddie's boots had been slashed open and cut through in several different spots. Investigators would later claim that despite the severe wounds, strange swelling and large slashes against his boots, there was no evidence of foul play. The official explanation that the investigators would claim about the strange slashes was that they believed that Eddie used his hunting knife to cut open his boots to help alleviate his swelling feet, and may have accidentally cut into his feet while doing so. Additionally, investigators would claim that Eddie Grant tripped over a branch and must have been too exhausted to get up, causing him to lay on the ground face down until he passed away from exposure. Friends and family would reject many of these bizarre explanations and felt that something far more nefarious had happened to Eddie Grant. Many would later remark that it seemed incredibly unlikely for Eddie to have slashed away at his boots while in such a precarious situation, as well as the fact that swollen feet require you to tighten your boots, not loosen them. Additionally, the fact that Eddie's hunting knife and scabbard were never recovered made it seem even more unlikely that he had slashed his own boots open, since he was not in possession of his knife for at least several miles. The strange case of James Dutton. On the 15th of June, back in 2012, United States Coast Guard veteran James Dutton took a short day trip to the Three Sisters Wilderness area near the French Peak Trailhead before suddenly disappearing without a trace. Unfortunately for his family, a search would not begin for James Dutton for almost 2 weeks after his disappearance. According to the official missing persons report, James Dutton was scheduled to pick up his nephew at the Portland International Airport on the 28th of June for a week-long trip to the Three Sisters Wilderness. Although the family would attempt to contact James prior to the flight to help confirm the pickup time, they were frustrated to get no response. Believing that James had merely been too busy to respond back, the nephew would end up at the Portland International Airport on the 28th, waiting for James Dutton to arrive. Oddly enough, after several hours and over a dozen missed calls, James would fail to appear at the airport, prompting his immediate family to perform a welfare check. In the late afternoon of June 28th, James' brother, Chris Dutton, would arrive at Jake's apartment to figure out what exactly was going on with his brother's absence. According to the Dutton family, it was incredibly uncharacteristic of James to ignore everyone's calls and to fail to show up for an important task. Given his history working in the United States Coast Guard, James had grown up to be one of the most punctual members of the family, as well as being consistently reliable. However, once Chris would arrive at James's apartment, it would become even more difficult to understand what was going on. Using a spare key to enter, Chris found that James' camping equipment had been prepared for the nephew's trip, as if he had had all of the equipment packed up and ready to be put into his truck to leave immediately. After getting a hold of James' calendar, Chris was also surprised to see that James had placed several reminders and a complex itinerary of activities he had planned on enjoying with his nephew for the 28th. Discovering the calendar and the prepared equipment, it seemed highly unlikely that James had merely forgotten about the event. After searching the apartment and garage, it became apparent to Chris that something terrible must have happened to James, as he and his truck appeared to have been missing. After waiting several more days in the hopes that James would return, but finding no sign of the missing brother, the family would then contact the Eugene Police Department to report James Dutton as a missing person. Unfortunately for investigators, it would not be until the 9th of July, more than 10 days since Chris Dutton would perform a welfare check, that a missing persons report for James Dutton would be filed. Unsure of where James could have ventured off to, the family was forced to wait another 3 weeks before any news on James's whereabouts would reach them. On the 30th of July, a United States Forest Service agent discovered an abandoned 1998 blue Nissan pickup truck that was found near the Mackenzie Pass, next to the French Peak Trailhead of the Three Sisters Wilderness National Park. After discovering the abandoned vehicle, the United States Forest Service would then contact the local authorities to discover if any reported missing persons had a matching vehicle anywhere in the region. After only a few minutes, the connection with the vehicle to the case of James Dutton would be made, and the United States Forest Service, working alongside the Eugene Police Department, would immediately begin a search and rescue operation for James Dutton over the course of the following week. After the first day, the United States Forest Service was able to confirm with the registered wilderness permits that James had first arrived in the area on the 15th of June, more than a month and a half before the search efforts began. Given the fact that James Dutton's permit was expected to lapse on the 18th of June, investigators considered this date to have been the earliest possible date to consider James as officially missing. Family members and detectives handling the case of James Dutton would express both frustration and suspicion at the bizarre handling of James Dutton's wilderness permits. Had it been the case that James had registered with the wildlife park for only 3 days, it seemed unexplainable that the park officers would not have begun a search for James much sooner, as he had failed to register when leaving after 3 days. For those that are unfamiliar with the function of the wilderness permits, United States national parks require hikers to register with the local park administration to receive permits that allow travelers to stay for only a limited amount of time. Many parks will issue permits lasting only a few days to a couple weeks that alert a hiker when they must leave the park to make room for additional guests or tourists. Although hikers can have their permits extended, if a wilderness permit lapses and the guest has not yet left the park officers must ensure that the guest is not overstaying their welcome. Given the fact that all hikers must register with the administration when leaving the park at any time, the wilderness permits are a great way to keep track of how many guests are in attendance and when a guest should be searched for. In many cases, the permits also act as a guarantee contract, which will lapse if a hiker leaves the national park and must purchase a new permit if wishing to re-enter, even if the original permit has not yet ended. It becomes incredibly difficult to explain then why it was that not a single search and rescue effort was called during the days following James Dutton's failure to register. Regardless of this strange oversight, search efforts for the missing hiker James Dutton would continue from the 31st of July to the 5th of August. Several dozen hikers and local residents would also join the search efforts, alongside professionally trained canine search teams and retired members of the United States military. However, as the search efforts continued, detectives began to wonder whether or not it was truly the case that James had gone missing due to an accident, or whether something far more nefarious was responsible for the bizarre facts surrounding the case. The first strange fact appeared to be that none of James's belongings were missing, with the majority of items left inside the truck as if they were untouched. Additionally, when camping or fishing, James typically stayed within a short radius of his truck and was incredibly familiar with the area. It was difficult to understand how it could have been that no sign of James was found, even after weeks of his disappearance, and the equipment of his truck, making it appear as if he had vanished within only a few minutes of his arrival in the area. Desperate for answers, family members and detectives would help put out several local articles asking hikers who had been in the region around the time James Dutton had arrived if they had seen or talked with James to get a more accurate picture of where he could have been or what could have happened. However, despite the park having been at one of its busiest times, not a single hiker or tourist would come forward with information about James Dutton. On the 6th of August, official search and rescue efforts would end, and the investigation into the Dutton disappearance would be handed over to Eugene Police Detective Jeff Donaga. For the official record, Detective Donaga would later share his opinion, claiming that he did not believe Jake disappeared due to an accident or voluntarily, and was actively pursuing an investigation suspecting foul play. Due to the public backlash on the part of the park failing to begin search and rescue efforts after the expiration of his wilderness permit, on the 15th of August, local newspapers would publish a public statement from the wilderness park officials claiming that permits are not used to keep track of individuals overstaying their welcome, but were instead used to help estimate the expected traffic in the area, a contradictory statement to park policy. It was announced in August of 2016 that his remains were found in a steep, heavily wooded area inside the Three Sisters Wilderness. To this day, the area surrounding the Three Sisters Wilderness Park has the highest number of reported missing persons cases than anywhere else in the country, with exceptionally higher rates of disappearances than is typical for similar national parks. Anonymous is a loosely organized, decentralized international hacktivist group that has become known for its online activism, protests, and operations. The group is known for its iconic Guy Fawkes mask and has been involved in various online and offline activities, including protests, distributed denial of service attacks, website defacements, and leaking sensitive information. The group was formed in 2003, and its goals are difficult to pin down as it's a decentralized organization with no clear leadership or hierarchy. However, some of the group's objectives include promoting freedom of speech, opposing internet censorship, fighting against corporate and government corruption, and advocating for the protection of individual privacy rights. It's important to note that Anonymous has no official membership, and anyone can claim to be a part of the group. As a result, it can be difficult to determine who exactly is behind any given operation or activity associated with Anonymous. One member of the group just came forward and said the following: "Greetings. This is Anonymous. It's about time the American people demanded that those in charge took accountability. Residents in East Palestine, Ohio, are still struggling with the aftershock in regards to the train derailment, and as the days go on, we are learning that more and more is being suppressed. On the night of the incident, a huge fireball was observed by various eyewitnesses throughout the area, and your officials responded by ignoring you and downplaying what had happened. We have multimillionaires sitting in their mansions telling everyday people that nothing is going to happen and that they won't be affected, when in reality those residents were sitting in a toxic wasteland. There's insiders who've also highlighted that this has massively impacted the Amish population. As of right now, they are the biggest group of self-reliant people in America. They live off the land, don't count on the government for anything, and live peaceful lives without much interference. When you follow the trail, the smoke literally covers the most populated Amish area in America. Seems odd that most of this is happening to people who want to better themselves and become self-reliant. It's also strange how farmers have been hit with bad luck in recent months. In another stroke of bad luck, since the Ohio derailment, various other trains have crashed, causing harm to local communities. It's not just wildlife that's suffering throughout these areas, but this is having a direct effect on people, with parents now coming forward and saying that their families are showing symptoms. Other residents from Ohio have said that birds have been seen acting strange, while some noted that fish and other animals living in bodies of water have been seen floating to the surface. Although all of this is happening, in early March, the residents in Ohio were told that the trains caused no injuries or risk to the public. Although it should be noted that when this was said, teams were observing the damage while wearing hazmat suits. The last thing to point out is Ohio is suing Norfolk Southern over the toxic train derailment in East Palestine." End quote. As of right now, what this individual has said is correct, and Ohio recently came forward and announced that they are suing the Norfolk Southern Railroad Company over the recent derailment. The lawsuit has demanded that the train company pay for the full cleanup of the accident, saying that there's proof that the incident has had a direct effect on the local environment. Furthermore, it's requested that the company conduct groundwater and soil monitoring for years to come, along with compensation for economic losses in East Palestine and surrounding areas. The chief executive officer of the company has apologized for what happened and said that he's pledged over $20 million to help Ohio, but didn't go into detail about how the derailment affected the area. Road workers and employees, though, have said that they shouldn't have been doing what they were and said this derailment could have been prevented. One employee said the following: "We shouldn't be running trains that are 150 car lengths long. There should be some limitations to the weight and the length of the trains. In this case, had the train not been 18,000 tons, it's very likely the effects of the derailment would have been mitigated." End quote. Another rail worker said the following: "There is no way in the 21st century that such a defect should still be threatening our communities. 40% of the weight of NS32N was grouped at the rear third of the train, which has always been bad practice and made more dangerous with longer, heavier trains. This fact almost certainly made the wreck dynamically worse." End quote. The United States Department of Transportation said the following: "Today, as local, state, and federal officials continue to investigate the cause of the derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, and monitor public health conditions, the United States Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg called for a three-pronged push to hold the freight rail industry accountable and improve safety. That includes laying out immediate steps for Class 1 railroads to take to improve rail safety in communities across America and to improve working conditions for rail employees. It comes on the heels of Secretary Buttigieg's letter to Norfolk Southern's chief executive officer, in which the secretary called for an end to the rail industry's vigorous resistance to increased safety measures, which has included litigation and lobbying Congress. Profit and expediency must never outweigh the safety of the American people, said United States Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. We are doing everything in our power to improve rail safety, and we insist that the rail industry do the same, while inviting Congress to work with us to raise the bar. The reforms demand that railroads take several actions, including requiring the owners of tank cars to expedite the phase-in of safer tank cars and to offer paid sick leave for rail workers. Call on Congress to increase maximum fines that the United States Department of Transportation can issue to rail companies for violating safety regulations up from the current maximum fine of $225,000, and state that the United States Department of Transportation will advance the train crew size rule and initiate a focused safety inspection program on routes over, which trains with large volumes of hazardous material travel. End quote.
Millions of tons of nuclear wastewater from Fukushima will be dumped into the sea. In the April of 2021, the Japanese government announced that beginning from 2023, more than 1 million tons of water contaminated from the Fukushima disaster would be released into the Pacific Ocean. An estimated 1.25 million tons of water have built up around Fukushima's power plant since the 2011 disaster. This is largely because TEPCO have been adding 200 tons of water into the reactors and the power plant site with each day, intending to maintain and balance temperatures to stop the few reactor cores that are left from melting too. Now, more than 1,000 tanks on the site are filled with contaminated wastewater. Whilst most radioactive material is filtered out, tritium, a radioactive hydrogen isotope, is not filtered out and is most dangerous to our health. However, 10 years on from the horrors, this cooling water system is showing some flaws, as TEPCO no longer has the space to store the contaminated waste. The solution decided upon as of 2021 is to release the contaminated water gradually, bit by bit, over many, many years, into the Pacific Ocean. According to a spokesperson from the US State Department, this plan is, quote, in accordance with global accepted nuclear safety standards, as many nuclear plants all over the world regularly let small volumes of tritium into the sea. Some people aren't happy with this solution, however. Many have expressed their concerns that TEPCO may not be wholly accurate in their judgment of the water's safety. These fears are amplified by a study published in August 2020, which found traces of many other radioactive isotopes in the Fukushima wastewater. Many local fishermen have expressed concern about the fishing industry, and some are concerned for the health of wildlife. Overall, we can only hope for a sustainable, long-term, safe solution to this problem. Health consequences of Fukushima. The direct health effects of the radiation were relatively controlled considering how severe the event was, not only among the emergency workers but also the residents. Other serious health consequences of this event include deaths during the evacuation process, increased mortality among displaced elderly people, and the collapse of the radiation emergency system. In a mental health survey, it was disclosed that the Fukushima accident led to severe psychological distress among the residents from the evacuation zones. There were also lifestyle-related problems such as increase in proportion of overweight individuals, an increase in prevalence of hypertension, and changes in health-related behaviours among the evacuees, all of which may lead to increased cardiovascular disease in the future. These health effects, which were much more significant than the physical effects, have not been properly addressed as general health risks. The inpatients and the elderly residents of nursing facilities were quickly evacuated by buses shortly after the accident. The evacuees were not accompanied by any medical personnel, and they were laid down on the seats of the jam-packed buses with full protective suits on. No form of medical care, not even food, was provided for several hours during the evacuation process. As a result of this, scores of patients died in an evacuation that was supposedly intended to minimize exposure to radiation. The life-threatening risk faced by these people was not the radiation, but discontinuation of daily medical care. The lack of medical support before, during, and after the evacuation process was regarded as the major cause of loss of life during the evacuation. The establishment of a restricted zone forced a large number of the residents out of the area, where they had to stay in temporary shelters or other places for long periods of time. The life conditions in shelters led to several types of health issues, such as outbreaks of communicable disease and mental stress. Also, sudden changes in lifestyle in foreign places may result in behavioral problems as a result of poor adaptation to new circumstances.
The Fukushima disaster released a significant amount of radioactive material into the environment. The area around the nuclear power plant was evacuated, and extensive efforts have been made to decontaminate the affected areas. The Fukushima nuclear disaster had significant environmental impacts, releasing a large amount of radioactive material into the air, land, and water. The disaster affected the local ecosystem and had far-reaching impacts on the environment beyond the immediate area surrounding the nuclear power plant. The release of radioactive material from the nuclear power plant resulted in significant contamination of the environment. The contamination of soil, water, and vegetation has affected the local ecosystem, with many species of plants and animals experiencing elevated levels of radiation exposure. The cleanup efforts in Fukushima involved removing large amounts of contaminated soil, which has led to soil erosion in some areas. Soil erosion can cause long-term damage to the ecosystem, affecting vegetation growth and causing water pollution. The Fukushima disaster resulted in the release of radioactive material into the Pacific Ocean, causing significant water pollution. The radioactive material has spread through ocean currents, affecting marine life and fishing industries. The release of radioactive material into the environment has disrupted the food chain, affecting the growth and survival of many species of plants and animals. National parks and areas of immense wilderness can be dangerous if visitors do not take proper precautions or ignore warning signs and guidelines. Interestingly, a few years back, a woman captured a strange photograph while exploring the Parc Chauveau in Canada. The image was taken on June 18, 2011, with the woman explaining that she was exploring the park with her family. She was with her 3 daughters at the time, and during the hike she took a variety of photographs. When she got home and looked through the images, in the background of one of them, she could see a mysterious humanoid, explaining that at the time she didn't notice anyone in the background. Oddly enough, when zooming in on the face, she couldn't make out what it was. To add more confusion, there wasn't anything close to the humanoid that would help with an identification. One user said the following: "The wilderness is home to many mysteries, and this isn't the first time that something strange has been captured in the background of someone's photo. This individual is definitely a humanoid, which helps us narrow down what it could be. If it's a human, which seems to be the most likely answer, then I would guess that the person is wearing something on their face. It looks like a fisherman, and this would explain why they were seen close to what appears to be a river, although this could just be the rocks giving off the impression of a river." The strange thing is that the woman said she didn't notice anyone at the time the photograph was taken, and that makes sense as they seem to blend into the background quite well. End quote. Others went down a more sinister route and suggested it was someone in camouflage and that they may have been waiting for unsuspecting hikers to walk past. Although this sounds dark, this wouldn't be the first time that something strange has unfolded in the wilderness, as each year thousands of strange reports are made by everyday people. Over 250,000 individuals are reported missing every year, with estimates of actual missing persons cases that are left unreported, pushing that total to more than 300,000 cases annually. With that many reports, it's no wonder that a vast majority of these cases are left unsolved. However, every now and then there are a series of missing cases that emerge that are so peculiar they become the subject of internet theories and impossible to explain cases. Known as the Missing 411, there appears to be a substantial number of missing persons cases relating to the disappearances of individuals from national parks. In fact, many of these missing 411 cases are believed to not be investigated too deeply, and this is due to some form of supernatural or paranormal event that took place in these undisturbed locations. The strange recovery of Gunnar Peterson. Unlike typical missing 411 cases, the disappearance of Gunnar Peterson would also feature a heartfelt recovery, with Gunnar appearing to have been in perfect health at the time of his recovery. His account for exactly what caused his disappearance is a matter even more difficult to explain, and is often remarked as one of the first true missing 411 abduction cases, dating as far back as the early 1950s. According to the Gunnar Peterson report, back on the 6th of August, Mr. Peterson had travelled to the Colville National Forest, located in the state of Washington, only 2 miles south of the Canadian border, with his entire family, to engage in a nice relaxing weekend vacation of hiking up and down the Churchill Mountain. Once at the National Forest, it became apparent to the family that the native wild-grown huckleberries were in season and ripe for picking. This sudden realization led the family to planning their day around picking huckleberries together on the side of Churchill Mountain and spending the rest of the day having a picnic at the summit. Unfortunately for the Peterson family, as the group were picking huckleberries near the top of the mountain in open areas well within line of sight of each other, the family suddenly noticed that the father and husband, Gunnar Peterson, was no longer within sight. Wondering where he had gone off to, Gunnar's daughter, Mrs. W.A. Graves, had called out to her father several times, but got no response. At first, the family was not worried about his temporary absence, believing that perhaps he had decided to use the restroom nearby, or ventured into a more secluded area, where he would no longer be within earshot of the group. However, as the day stretched on, the family grew increasingly worried, as every member continued searching and calling out to Gunnar, but getting no response. After seeing no sign of Gunnar for over 3 hours, the family would immediately call the local Stephen County Sheriff Department and report 65-year-old Gunnar as missing. Within only a few hours of being alerted, Sheriff Beryl Warren would bring together several dozen search and rescue volunteers made up of local residents, fellow law enforcement officers, the National Park Forest Service personnel, and several dozen soldiers from the local military base. The first night, the search and rescue volunteers focused on combing through the area where he had last been seen with the family, following any trails and areas that connected with wild huckleberry bushes that the father could have ventured off into. Despite looking through every open huckleberry bush, there was no sign of Gunnar. After the first 2 days of searching, law enforcement and search and rescue volunteers were growing increasingly desperate due to the sudden drop in temperature in the area and the light rain. Given the fact that the mountain stands at a height of almost 4,800 feet in elevation and is filled with layers of lush, thick forest and hundreds of small running bodies of water, search and rescue teams were growing increasingly concerned with the possibility of finding Gunnar Peterson alive, as they believed that the terrain would have made it incredibly difficult for Mr. Peterson to have safely made his way down the mountain while lost and alone. By the 3rd day of Gunnar Peterson's disappearance, a specialized canine search and rescue team was employed in the search that had come from Idaho and eastern Washington. After the family supplied the dogs with clothes and shoes that Gunnar Peterson had worn, the dogs had followed the scent into the middle of a huckleberry bush path where Mr. Peterson had last been seen by his family. Oddly enough, the sheriff would remark that the canines seemed confused as to where the trail continued and were unable to maintain Gunnar's scent for long before losing it entirely. After 7 days of looking for Mr. Peterson, search and rescue volunteers started to give up hope on finding Mr. Peterson alive, causing the search efforts to slowly taper off as law enforcement, military personnel and forest servicemen had the primary goal of finding a body and no longer a living person. The search for Mr. Peterson would continue for another 3 days until Gunnar's daughter and her husband would find Gunnar more than 5 miles away from where he had last been seen. According to Gunnar Peterson's daughter, she and her husband continued searching for her father in a circling radius that would lead them more than 5 miles away from the base of Churchill Mountain. As they were in the area, they started to notice a collection of abandoned houses and shacks seemingly constructed in the middle of nowhere. According to locals in the region, the houses had been constructed many years ago and were at the center of what was referred to as high strangeness, with many of the locals too scared or superstitious to venture into the areas. As they searched through the abandoned shacks, Gunnar's daughter would find Gunnar sleeping in one of the abandoned buildings, seemingly in perfect health. According to Gunnar Peterson, he had survived in the area for 10 days, primarily by drinking rainwater and living off of huckleberries as his main source of food. Oddly enough, at the time of his recovery, Gunnar Peterson had only been aware of 8 days that had passed and had no idea that he had been missing for a little over 10 days since the search began. When search and rescue volunteers and investigators questioned Gunnar Peterson as to how he appeared to have disappeared from the region, it became obvious that something far more bizarre had occurred. Gunnar Peterson claimed, when talking to investigators, that he had been picking huckleberries with his family only a few feet away from the group when he suddenly felt a large mass strike the back of his head. He would then wake up sometime during the middle of the night in pitch-black darkness, believing that a falling rock must have knocked him unconscious. Oddly enough, there were no marks or signs of damage against Mr. Peterson's head, and he had been standing in an open field of bushes on the side of the highest point on the mountain, where any falling debris would have been difficult to explain. Even more bizarre was that Mr. Peterson counted only 7 days having passed after he had awoken from his unconscious state. This led him to believe that he must have been knocked unconscious for a period of over 2 days, as he was unable to account for 2 of the 10 days that he had been missing, originally believing that he had been missing for only 8 days. The exchange of volunteer search and rescuer Gerald Debery. On the 10th of October, back in 2011, a small family had been visiting the frozen wilderness of surrounding Fairbanks, Alaska, located on the northeastern side of the small town, when the group suddenly noticed that one of their family members was no longer following closely behind. A young woman by the name of Melinda Mindy Stratz had been trailing behind the group as they traveled through the area, riding on her bright red four-wheeler vehicle that was pulling a small trailer and her Jack Russell Terrier, when it appeared that she had suddenly vanished from the area. Immediately, Melinda's brother, Michael Stratz, contacted the Fairbanks Police Department and alerted them to his sister's sudden and unexplainable disappearance only a few minutes prior, at around 2 a.m. as they were traveling. Due to the dropping temperatures in the region, as well as the light snowfall, the local police department did not hesitate to contact Alaska State Troopers and volunteer groups to begin an immediate search throughout the area. Within a couple of hours, several teams of search and rescue volunteers were in the area, alongside the Alaska State Troopers, to begin searching the region within a 5-mile radius of where Melinda Stratz had last been seen. The team would search the area all morning, throughout the afternoon and early into the evening, when one of the search and rescue volunteers would spot a bright red vehicle, a small trailer, and Melinda Stratz at the bottom of a small ravine known as Frozen Foot Creek. Given the dropping temperatures and the hours that she had been missing, Melinda was immediately escorted to medical services to ensure a rapid recovery. It was at around this time that it became obvious that Melinda appeared to have been in a state of intense confusion. Little details surrounding Melinda's state and recovery are known, however. It's believed that Melinda is unable to remember any details during the time of her disappearance and up until her reappearance, but believes that she must have turned off at a wrong corner and ended up down in the Frozen Foot Creek after spending several minutes looking for her family as she was traveling. However, another strange fact about Melinda's recovery was that several search and rescue volunteers had already claimed to have visited the area of Frozen Foot Creek, but were unable to have seen any sign of Melinda Stratz or her bright red vehicle and trailer. As family and friends were celebrating Melinda's recovery and her safe return, volunteer teams began to realize that one of their search and rescuers had been missing for roughly several hours. It was at around this time that Alaska State Troopers began their second search and rescue mission for a man named Gerald Debery, who was believed to have gone missing sometime around 6:45 in the evening, when he had last been seen an estimated 4 miles away from the trailhead they were currently searching. According to fellow search and rescue members, Gerald Debery had returned to the primary camp sometime in the late afternoon to take a break from his search efforts, as he claimed that he needed time to warm up, as he was getting far colder than he was used to. Soon thereafter, one of the volunteers had constructed a fire for the team to use, and Gerald Debery was provided with another overcoat on top of his existing coat, as he stayed around the fire for a few minutes to help warm up. After a sufficient break and feeling warm and ready to begin his search efforts again, Gerald got onto his bright green Yamaha Kodiak four-wheeler vehicle and travelled out 4 miles from the trailhead where he had last been seen. Several minutes after Gerald Debary had last been seen, Melinda Mindy Stratz had been found at the bottom of Frozen Foot Creek. Rather than travel out and tell all of the search and rescue members that the woman had been found, many of the volunteers had been holding small portable radios, and so a message was transmitted to all members, and for them to return to the base campsite as soon as possible. After an hour, while Melinda was recovering and search and rescue members were getting ready to head home, that was when the teams realized Debary had yet to return. Given the fact that Debary had great knowledge of the nearby area and should have already returned by that moment in time, troopers and search and rescue teams immediately began their second search to recover Gerald Debary. Oddly enough, it appeared as if the tracks to his four-wheeler suddenly ended halfway through following his trail, as if a freshly laid pack of snow had fallen in only a specific area to prevent an accurate read of where his four-wheeler had travelled. Now worried that Debary was trapped somewhere, injured or suffering from the effects of hypothermia, teams continued through the night looking for Debary, using grid-like patterns of search to cover as much ground as possible, looking for any sign of the missing member. As the night dragged on, the snow continued to fall, and it became obvious that normal methods of search and rescue would be unable to locate Gerald Debary, who was now assumed to have been gravely injured and unable to return to safety on his own. Several hours later, within the early hours of the morning on the 11th of October 2011, Alaska State Troopers employed the use of advanced aerial support in the form of a helicopter and a Piper Super Cub aeroplane, using state-of-the-art thermal signature cameras to help locate Gerald Debary and his four-wheeler, which was believed to give off a strong heat signature, which would make recovery much easier. Unfortunately, after several more hours, next to nothing was discovered, and over the course of the week, the search for Gerald Debary dwindled down to a standstill. One of Gerald's friends, a man by the name of Paul Potvin, who owned the nearby lodge where the team and the Alaska State Troopers were using as a base of operations, claimed that he believed something far more sinister had occurred to Gerald Debary, given the strange events surrounding his disappearance. On the 14th of October, 3 days following Debary's disappearance, Paul would provide the following statement to the local newspaper known as the Alaska Dispatch. "It's a mystery. The four-wheeler is gone. Something had to have happened to him. He didn't get lost. Everybody agrees with that. He's been out there way too many times to get lost. That's the most baffling part." Oddly enough, almost exactly a year later, a local miner who had been working in the nearby Faith Creek mine, located at mile 69 off of the Stees Highway, spotted an abandoned bright green four-wheeler resting on a nearby rock at a slight incline. Believing that the abandoned four-wheeler was a bad sign, the miner contacted the local authorities, who immediately searched the vehicle and found that it had once belonged to Gerald Debary and was most likely the vehicle he used during his search. Investigators also noted that it appeared that there was still gas inside the vehicle, and that the vehicle appeared to have been purposefully turned off rather than left to run until it cut out. Although another search was done in the area, no sign of Gerald or any of his clothes or equipment was uncovered. People are naturally curious, and the idea of something unexplained or unknown can be intriguing. Mysterious aircrafts and encounters often involve mystery and uncertainty, which can be exciting for some individuals. The idea that we may not be alone in the universe is a fascinating and exciting prospect for many. Over the last few years, residents in Turkey have been reporting an increase in mysterious aircrafts, going on to note that they don't match aircrafts such as planes and helicopters, and on some occasions have been seen flying at incredible speeds. Various photographs and videos have been making their way online, showing what appears to be glowing orbs and silent objects in the sky sitting in the sky, with residents saying that they don't make a sound. One of these videos shows strange white orbs flying around buildings. A few moments later, there's a lightning strike, which goes on to reveal a large object sitting stationary in the sky. When this footage made its way online, it caused various people to put forward different theories to try and explain it. Some suggested that the mysterious aircraft was genuine, and that the orbs could have been sent out by the larger craft, while others said that the video could be real, but that what we are seeing in the sky is just a natural phenomena that gives off the appearance that a large object is there. Skeptics also said that the footage is most likely fake and created by special effects. Interestingly, Those who have researched unidentified objects have said that orbs are one of the most common phenomena that's witnessed, saying that witnesses all across the world are seeing these things, and that as of right now no one is entirely sure what they are. These glowing orbs come in a variety of different colors, ranging from blue, red, orange, yellow, pink, silver, green and black. And most people who have seen them have said that they appear to pulsate. Although mysterious flying aircrafts seem like a new phenomena, declassified documents show the exact opposite, and that officials have been aware of these aircrafts for many years now, and in many cases struggle to explain their origins and how they are able to achieve what they do. During 1952, following the end of World War II and the growing tensions between the NATO allies and the Soviet Union, it was not uncommon for simulated naval war games to take place throughout different strategic points controlled by NATO. What was uncommon, however, were the series of reports surrounding unidentified objects, flying saucers, and encounters with what could only be described as advanced technology. Referred to as Operation Mainbrace, during the month of September back in 1952, there was roughly a 2-week period in which a series of unidentified objects were sighted by countless civilians and military personnel. According to the documents that would later be dubbed Operation Mainbrace, the mysterious sightings began on the 14th of September during a series of NATO exercises known as Exercise Mainbrace. Interestingly, this happened only a few months after the sightings of strange crafts were made over Washington, D.C. in the United States. The Exercise Mainbrace included more than 200 naval ships, 1,000 planes, and 80,000 soldiers from several NATO countries, with the purpose of practicing war game-styled maneuvers that would better prepare the NATO allies for a believed to be eventual European attack from the Soviet Union. However, during the exercise, ships were alerted by top Pentagon officials to keep an eye out for mysterious sightings in the area. When later asked to clarify what they meant, the Pentagon officials claimed that their reports were filed in a joking manner and were not military confirmation on the existence of advanced life, a behavior uncharacteristic of naval intelligence and the British government as a whole. Regardless of whether or not the report was filed in a joking manner, a series of unidentified objects would be sighted by military personnel and civilians between the 13th and 25th of September, disrupting the wargame exercises and forcing the Royal Air Force and NATO allies to treat flying saucer reports with grave severity. The first Mainbrace encounter took place on the 13th of September, when the naval captain running a Danish destroyer claimed to have spotted a triangular-shaped object moving across the sky at record speeds that even their most powerful jets could not maintain. The crew of the Danish destroyer confirmed the sightings as well, with Lieutenant Commander Schmidt-Jensen claiming that collected data showed that the craft was moving consistently at 900 miles per hour. Even though the sighting took place at night, the entirety of the crew could see the craft as it emitted a bright blue glow. The second report surrounding the mysterious disruptions was made by the American-owned USS Franklin D. Roosevelt. According to an American newspaper, it reported that a man named Wallace Litwin began to notice many of the crew members running all throughout the ship in a heightened state of alert. Fearing that the exercises had become an attack from the Soviet Union, he began looking for the source of the panic and noticed a large commotion on the deck of the ship. Wallace Litwin wrote that several pilots, flight crew members and top military officials were positioned on the deck, barking orders and pointing at a silver sphere in the sky that appeared to be silently hovering near the ship and following the USS Franklin D. Roosevelt during its exercise. Reporter Wallace Litwin quickly took 4 high-quality coloured photos of the round silver object before it disappeared into the distance. When questioned surrounding the images and legitimacy of the claim, the United States government offered the explanation that the craft was nothing more than a weather balloon that had temporarily dipped down near the battleship during the war games. However, these claims would be put into question, as reporter Wallace Litwin recounts that shortly after taking the images of the craft, he had gone below deck and told his fellow newspaper correspondents that he had just shot a flying saucer, acting as if his camera had been a gun. This claim of military action quickly alerted the ship's executive officer, who investigated the claims himself and found that the craft was genuinely not a weather balloon. According to the executive officer, investigations had shown that a weather balloon had not been released that day. When the officer radioed the Midway, the only other NATO-approved ship in the vicinity, the ship also confirmed that no weather balloons were in the air or unaccounted for. Litwin would write the following report. In other words, the skies above this NATO fleet were very carefully observed and nothing flew around overhead unobserved, but I knew that I had taken a picture of what looked like a large ping-pong ball 10 feet over my head. End quote. The United States Project Blue Book investigation team would do a follow-up investigation and provide the report that the object moved too fast to have been a weather balloon. One of the most notable accounts of these sightings would take place on the 19th of September at 11 in the morning, and this was when a large silver-coloured disc-shaped object began following a Royal Air Force Gloucester Meteor that had been returning to Royal Air Force Station Topcliffe. Not only did the pilot of the Gloucester Meteor confirm his sighting with a number of military ground crew working at the Royal Air Force Station, but several additional reports had also been filed by observers on the ground, alongside civilian reports of the unidentified object trailing the Gloucester Meteor. The craft was described as being a silvery circular object and began to descend in a swinging pendulum motion, similar to that of a falling sycamore leaf. However, before the craft reached the ground, observers commented that it rotated on its own axis and then shot off at an incredible sudden speed that looked more like a shooting star. Royal Air Force Flight Lieutenant John Kilburn, with the 269th Squadron, commented saying the following statement: "I have never seen such a phenomenon before. The movements of the object were not identifiable with anything I have seen in the air." End quote. Despite efforts made by the British government, the story of the Topcliffe sighting was leaked to the press and made the headline for the front-page edition of the September 20th copy of the Yorkshire Evening Press and the headlines for the September 21st copy of the Sunday Dispatch. As mentioned earlier, this event happened after mysterious aircrafts were seen above Washington. Many people will say that if advanced life forms truly existed, then these visitors from another planet would quickly fly to the leaders of our world and confront them with their concerns or agendas. Depictions from old science fiction movies of the early 1900s showcase this thought more so than others, with props of unidentified objects landing on the White House lawn, filled with alien life attempting to approach the leader of the free world. However, what many are not actually aware of is that back in 1952, this very much proved to be the case. Later referred to by Project Blue Book specialists as the invasion of Washington, D.C. For roughly 8 consecutive days from July 19th to July 27th, the most publicized sightings of mysterious aircrafts took place above the nation's capital. Not only was there a tidal wave of reports that flooded in from the general population, but the reports consisted of high officials and members of the military and air force. One of these reports took place at 11:40 in the evening on Saturday, July 19th, and this was from a man by the name of Edward Nugent. Mr. Nugent was an air traffic controller at the Washington National Airport and detected 7 objects on his radar moving at speeds, flight paths, and directions that no known human craft could have produced at the time. Nugent later wrote the following: "We knew immediately that a very strange situation existed. Their movements were completely radical compared to those of ordinary craft." End quote. This was merely the first report out of hundreds of sightings that took place during that time. This later caused a climax by then-President Harry Truman, who ordered the Air Force to investigate and provide an explanation for the wave of sightings and odd radar information data. This further led to involvement from the Central Intelligence Agency that worked with the Office of Scientific Intelligence and the Office of Current Intelligence to lead their own investigations into the matter. Given the credibility of the witness reports, the information retrieved by air traffic controllers and radar data specialists, and further investigations led by the Central Intelligence Agency, the existence of mysterious aircrafts, seemed certain. Even with the abundance of evidence and eyewitness testimonies, the United States Air Force Director of Operations said the objects were stars. Many spoke out about this explanation and said that countless military officials tracked these objects and said there was no way these crafts were meteors or stars. Back in the year 2000, marine archaeologist Robert Ballard and his team discovered the first evidence of a civilization that may have perished in a great flood of the Black Sea around 5000 BCE. The discovery was made during an expedition to the Black Sea, where they found the remains of an ancient settlement, including human artifacts and evidence of farming, that had been submerged in water. The discovery suggested that the Black Sea was once a freshwater lake that was flooded by seawater from the Mediterranean, leading to the displacement of many ancient communities in the region. This discovery provided new insights into the region's ancient history and how environmental changes can impact human civilization. The Great Flood of the Black Sea, also known as the Deluge, is a natural disaster that is believed to have occurred around 7,500 years ago. The event is thought to have been triggered by the melting of the ice caps, which caused a rise in sea levels and ultimately led to the flooding of the Black Sea. Prior to the flood, the Black Sea was a freshwater lake, known as the Lake of Maotis. However, as the water levels began to rise, the Bosporus Strait, which connects the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, was breached, allowing salt water from the Mediterranean to flow into the Black Sea. The flooding of the Black Sea is believed to have occurred over the course of several decades, with the water levels gradually rising as the Bosporus Strait widened. As the water levels increased, the shoreline receded, and many settlements that had been built along the coast were submerged. The flooding of the Black Sea is thought to have had a significant impact on the people who lived in the region at the time. Many scholars believe that the flood may have contributed to the development of the Noah's Ark story, as well as other flood myths from around the world. In recent years, archaeologists have discovered evidence of ancient settlements that were submerged during the flood, including pottery, tools, and other artifacts. These discoveries have shed new light on the impact of the Great Flood of the Black Sea and have helped to further our understanding of this major event in human history. Many ancient cultures around the world have stories and legends that describe a great flood or deluge that destroyed the world or wiped out humanity. While the details of these stories vary widely, there are several common themes and possible explanations for why so many cultures have similar flood myths. One possible explanation is that many of these cultures lived in regions that were susceptible to flooding, such as river deltas or coastal areas. In these areas, floods were a regular occurrence and would have been a significant threat to the survival of communities. As a result, stories and legends about devastating floods may have been passed down through generations as a way to warn people about the dangers of living in these areas. Another possible explanation is that some of these flood myths may have been inspired by actual historical events, such as the previously mentioned flooding of the Black Sea or the Mesopotamian flood that is described in the Epic of Gilgamesh. In these cases, the memory of the flood may have been passed down through oral tradition, and over time, the details of the story may have been embellished or altered. Religious or spiritual beliefs may also have played a role in the development of flood myths. Many ancient cultures believed in powerful deities or spirits that controlled the natural world, and floods may have been seen as a punishment from the gods or a sign of divine intervention. In some cases, flood myths may have been used to explain the origins of the world or the nature of human existence. Finally, it's possible that the prevalence of flood stories is simply a coincidence or the result of cultural diffusion. As cultures interacted with each other through trade, migration, and other forms of exchange, stories and legends may have been shared and adapted, leading to the spread of flood stories across different regions and cultures. What did the ancient Sumerians say about the Great Flood? The ancient Sumerians, who lived in Mesopotamia around 4,000 years ago, are among the many cultures that have a flood story in their mythology. The Sumerian flood is recorded in several different texts, including the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Atrahasis epic. According to the Sumerian flood, the gods became angry with humanity for their disobedience and decided to send a flood to destroy all life on earth. The god Enki, who was sympathetic to humanity, warned a man named Ziusudra, also known as Utnapishtim, of the impending disaster and instructed him to build a large boat or ark to save himself, his family, and the animals. Ziusudra followed Enki's instructions and built the boat, filling it with animals and provisions. When the flood came, it lasted for 7 days and 7 nights, during which time the boat was tossed and turned by the raging waters. Eventually, the flood receded, and the boat came to rest on a mountain. Ziusudra and his family emerged from the boat, along with the animals, and were hailed as heroes for their survival. The gods, realizing their mistake in wiping out all life, granted Ziusudra and his wife immortality as a reward for their courage and wisdom. The Sumerian flood story shares many similarities with other flood myths from around the world, including the biblical story of Noah's Ark. It's possible that these stories are all based on an actual historical event. Regardless of their origins, flood stories continue to capture the imagination of people around the world and offer insights into the ways that ancient cultures sought to understand and explain the forces of nature and the mysteries of the universe.
Valley of the Golden Mummies. At the Baharia Oasis, a breathtaking discovery was made, an acropolis which contained various tombs of great importance. 105 mummies were found, all in idyllic condition for bodies so old. The area came to be known as the Valley of Golden Mummies, and it is theorized that there may be 10,000 mummies buried here, deep in the earth. Dr. Zahi Hawass discovered them about 380 kilometers from the pyramids. It was an accident when a guard's donkey's leg fell through a hole in the ground. They found gold glimmering beautifully down below and decided to excavate. Alongside the bodies, 4 tombs dating back to 330 BCE were found. Some mummies were gilded and obviously wealthy citizens, merchants, and their loved ones most likely. Some mummies were wrapped in linen, a more economic approach at mummification. It seems that sometimes whole families were laid in the same graves. Archaeologists found one female mummy's head laying on the stomach of a male mummy, assumed to have once been her husband. Further artifacts were found, such as gold, jewellery, pottery, coins, bracelets, rings, earrings, and all types of precious metals ranging from silver to bronze to gold and even ivory. The burial site included little clay statuettes of mourners. The point of these was for them to weep for the deceased for eternity and let them never be forgotten. Other statuettes were found of mothers who symbolized fertility. Empty vials were found, and the largest speculation is that these held tears for the loss of life. The tombs lacked any inscriptions. What started off as an accidental discovery of gold turned into an excavation of 105 mummies, which since its initial founding has become 200 mummies. This has revealed an incredible amount about Romanized mummification during this period, and the culture of the ancient Roman-influenced Egyptians. All this greatness occurred because a donkey took one wrong step and its leg fell through the sand. The fact that the most grandiose of discoveries are found by complete and utter accident makes one wonder how many more things lay beneath the ground, hidden right underneath our very feet. Human history pushed back 400,000 years by new discovery. Sometimes it's the smallest of changes that have the biggest ripple effect, and our whole perspective can shift ever so rapidly. History might seem as though it is stuck in the past, though in reality, history is reflected and dictated by the present. Everything we learn that has happened is susceptible to change with any new discovery. In this case, a single jawbone managed to rewrite our historical timeline by a staggering 400,000 years. A fossil of a lower jaw was uncovered in Ethiopia back in 2013. It has been dated to reveal that it is 2.8 million years old and holds important insights into how human jaws and teeth have developed throughout time. As far as we know, this jaw is the oldest piece of evidence we have from any species that belongs to the genus Homo, like us humans eventually came to be. So, this jaw has the potential to clue us in on just how the species within the genus Homo managed to evolve from their most primitive states all the way to us today, not only in the 21st century, but also back to when we became Homo sapiens at all. Up until this finding, the fossils that have been found to be any older than 2.5 million years old have been too poorly preserved to obtain any valuable data from them. This discovery marked an important turning point in archaeological research, in which we were able to see some of the earliest records we have of our lineage. Dr. William Kimball, the director of the Institute of Human Origins at Arizona State University, said, "The leady jaw helps narrow the evolutionary gap. It's thanks to the fossil, which represents a critical point in the timeline of human evolution, that we have a better understanding of this transitional period, even if it means correcting a lot of research that we already took for granted. This is a vastly noteworthy example of just how much change one small finding can bring to an entire discipline, subject of work, and species as a whole. Human evolution is perhaps one of the largest butterfly effects known to man. The small changes, the minor decisions, and the single mutations are still evident millennia later." Denisovan's DNA reveals mystery of human evolution. We have long had an interest in those that came before us, and while the Neanderthals are spoken of somewhat with frequency, the Denisovans were only found to have existed in 2008. This recent discovery of their ancient existence has led to many shifting details in our understanding of human evolution. They have made an appearance in our archaeological field and have left a trail of new research in their wake. Even following their finding in 2008, our timeline stood to be corrected, with us believing they existed just 50,000 years ago. As of 2015, however, we found that this number was far too limiting, and that, despite initial understandings, the Denisovans had been hanging around and walking the Earth for what could easily have been tens of thousands of years longer. This age correction was the result of speculations surrounding the true age of some fossils that were key in understanding this species. DNA from the species was tested, obtained from a tooth fossil found in a southwestern Siberian cave. From this tooth fossil, alongside the other somewhat limited data we have so far on this species, researchers have been able to conclude that the Denisovans were more accurately walking the Earth a staggering 110,000 years ago. The director and co-author of the study, Svante Parbo from the Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, said in an interview with CS Monitor, "We got the first glimpse of genetic variation in Denisovans, and it turns out they have quite a bit of variation, about as much as Neanderthals." The tooth fossils looked at were determined to be from two separate people, with one of them having been alive a significant length of time before the other. This was determined by the missing mutations within the genes, giving us further insight into where these specific genes may have come from. Despite some people's theories, the Neanderthals and Denisovans, whilst similar, are very distinct species. Their resemblance is incredible, with the differences between their species only being evident after very closely analysing the original fossils. This intense level of examination that is required is what allowed the Denisovans to go undetected for so long.
The Dogon people, an indigenous tribe of Mali in West Africa, have a rich cultural heritage and a deep knowledge of astronomy, including the star system Sirius. The Dogon have an oral tradition that dates back thousands of years, and they have been studying the night sky for generations. According to their oral tradition, the Dogon learned about Sirius from beings known as the Nomos, who they believe came to Earth from the Sirius star system. The Nomos are said to have taught the Dogon about the Sirius star system, including its complex orbit and the existence of a third star, Sirius B, which is invisible to the naked eye. The accuracy of the Dogon's knowledge of Sirius has been the subject of much debate among scholars, with some arguing that it's evidence of extraterrestrial contact, while others attribute it to the Dogon's own observations and astronomical knowledge. Some have also suggested that the Dogon's knowledge of Sirius may have been influenced by contact with European astronomers in the 19th and 20th centuries. Regardless of the source of their knowledge, the Dogon's understanding of the Sirius system is impressive and reflects their deep connection to the natural world and the cosmos. Even Harvard University came forward and said that the tribe's claims were impressive. They said the following on their website: "The cause of all the commotion was the claim that the Dogon believed that Sirius has a dark, invisible companion with a 50-year orbit. The companion is very heavy and made of a special metal which is not found on Earth. This is an accurate description of our knowledge of Sirius B after it was observed with powerful telescopes and described by scientists using the theories of quantum mechanics and relativity." End quote. Another scientist detailed that the Dogon tribe isn't just educated on Sirius, but said that they detailed impressive knowledge about planets within our solar system, stating that they knew that Jupiter had various moons and that Saturn has rings made up of space debris. They also agreed that the tribe's knowledge of Sirius is impressive and that many of the details they gave matches recent discoveries. As mentioned, various theories have been put forward for why the tribe has this knowledge, but scholars have said that further research is needed in order to come to a conclusive answer.
A mysterious giant blinking object has been detected near our galaxy's centre. Nothing is more mysterious and unreachable than space. Despite decades of intensive study and research, scientists have only explored about 4% of the visible universe. An estimated 25,000 light-years from Earth, astronomers have found a star that appeared to blink out of existence for several months before suddenly reappearing. This unique star was affectionately named VVV WIT-08 and is thought to belong to a completely new class of stars altogether. This newly discovered star type is unexplainably enormous, reportedly 100 times the size of our Sun. While the blinking is thought to be caused by an unknown orbiting body that eclipses the star once every few decades. The name of the star appears to be a highly scientific smash-up of important letters. WIT actually stands for, "What is this?" The case of VVV WIT-08 has baffled astronomers. Not only is this star the first of its kind, but no one can explain what exactly could be eclipsing it from sight. The most prominent theory is that this orbiting object could be a planet or even another star, surrounded by a thick, opaque disk of dust locked in an orbit around VVV WIT-08. This theory is supported by the discovery of a few other giant stars that disappear for months or even years at a time. The most famous example is Epsilon Aurigae, a supergiant star that is nearly eclipsed for up to 730 days at a time, and another giant star known as TYC 25056721 is regularly eclipsed for a whopping 3.5 years. There are certainly more to be found, but the challenge now is in figuring out what the hidden companions are and how they came to be surrounded by disks, despite orbiting so far from the giant star, said astronomer Lee Smith of the University of Cambridge. In doing so, we might learn something new about how these kinds of systems evolve. Astronomers find 7 dwarf galaxy groups. Dwarf galaxies are small bundles of stars containing between 1,000 and up to several billion stars. This might sound like a lot, but our own Milky Way galaxy has between 200 and 400 billion stars in it alone. This can make these dwarf galaxies up to 1,000 times smaller than our own galaxy. Researchers have never had too much evidence for this theory, though it is often believed that galaxies are formed when dwarf galaxies merge together. This was until 2017, when a research paper was published giving us some more evidence to back up these claims. Data was collected from the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, alongside a handful of optical telescopes. This allowed a team of astronomers to begin their research, a process that began with the observation of 7 individual, distinctly separate groups of dwarf galaxies. The team noted that the conditions of these dwarf galaxies were perfect to observe and see if they could in fact merge, morphing into one larger galaxy, with the possibility of a spiral galaxy like our Milky Way also being considered. This research could give us substantial evidence to support our claims that what we consider mature galaxies today were once much smaller galaxies billions and billions of years ago. Sabrina Stierwalt, an astronomer with the National Radio Astronomy Observatory and the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, explained that we know the universe needs to bring small galaxies together to form a bigger one, but that up until now we could not prove it or show how it happened. She continued to say, "For the first time, we have found examples of the first steps in this process. entire populations of dwarf galaxies that are all bound together in the same general neighborhoods. The team analyzed the data gathered from the SDSS in excruciating detail, looking for dwarf galaxies that looked as though they could be interacting with one another. The team were keeping their eyes peeled for pairs that could be part of bigger assemblies of alike galaxies. Further research was then conducted to put these images into perspective, with the Magellan Telescope in Chile, the Apache Point Observatory in New Mexico, and the Gemini Telescope in Hawaii being used to check that these dwarf galaxies are similar distances from Earth, not just aligned, as this could suggest that they are gravitationally bound together. It is hoped that this study provides some more data for future research groups studying groups of dwarf galaxies. This can offer a glimpse into how galaxies are formed and possibly help people to predict future formation patterns. Astronomers have discovered a nearby super-Earth in the habitable zone. The possibility of a habitable planet out there in our universe, or any universe, is an intriguing notion for many people. Would there be life already on the planet? Could humans emigrate there to live if necessary? It is human nature to want to know we are not alone. Astronomers in Hawaii have recently discovered a new super-Earth using the National Observatory of Japan's Subaru telescope. The planet, named Ross 508b, orbits a red dwarf named Ross 508. Before we get too much further, let's go over a few key things. First off, what is a super-Earth? Super-Earth does not mean the makeup of a planet is better than Earth. It is a classification of planets not in our solar system that are heavier than Earth and lighter than Neptune and Uranus. A super-Earth can be between 2 and 10 times the size of Earth. A red dwarf is the most common star in the galaxy. It's small, as its name suggests, and not as hot as the other stars. What makes the combination of Ross 508 and Ross 508b newsworthy? They are only 36.5 light-years away. Ross 508b is a planet 4 times the size of Earth, and considering what we already know about the mass limit of planets, it's likely a terrestrial planet, meaning its surface is rocky and not formed of gases. It's also in the habitable zone, but this does not mean it can necessarily support life. The habitable zone refers to the distance from its orbital star, therefore creating the correct temperature to have liquid water present on the surface of the super-Earth planet. If Ross 508b cannot support life for certain, why is there so much buzz about it? Finding a little planet orbiting a dim star is no small feat. The discovery of Ross 508b shows off the success of the technique and tools used to search for exoplanets. This means we could be a few steps closer to finding an Earth 2.0, just in case this one doesn't pan out for our species.
Illegal digging, also known as looting or tomb raiding, has been a persistent problem in Egypt for many years. The country's rich archaeological heritage and the lure of valuable artifacts have made it a prime target for looters. According to a 2018 report by the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities, there were more than 30 cases of illegal digging or attempted illegal digging reported in the country that year alone. However, it is believed that many more cases go unreported. Illegal digging can have a devastating impact on Egypt's cultural heritage. It can lead to the destruction of archaeological sites and the loss of important artifacts that can never be recovered. It also fuels a black market for antiquities, where stolen artifacts are sold for large sums of money. The Egyptian government has taken steps to combat illegal digging, including increasing penalties for those caught and stepping up patrols of archaeological sites. However, the problem persists, and more needs to be done to protect Egypt's cultural heritage from looters. Just recently, a video of a digger was uploaded to social media, where the user said that they found something interesting. The object in question appears to be gold, and has on the back of it hieroglyphics, while on the front is what appears to be an unknown female Egyptian. The carving is strange as it always appears to be staring at you. However, the phenomenon of the eyes appearing to follow you is actually an optical illusion called the Mona Lisa effect. It is named after Leonardo da Vinci's famous painting, the Mona Lisa, which appears to follow viewers no matter where they stand. The effect occurs because of the way our eyes perceive objects in the visual field. When we look at a painting or a portrait, our brains perceive it as a three-dimensional object, even though it is actually flat. This means that our brains try to adjust our perspective based on the position of the painting, causing the eyes to appear to follow us. Oddly enough, though, it's reported that the digger who found this artifact also found various other ancient relics, saying that gold bars along with small golden statues were also found. The digger went on to detail that these objects were found inside an old abandoned tunnel, but didn't give away any details as to where this tunnel was located. Ancient Egypt was one of the most important and influential civilizations in human history. The discoveries and artifacts left behind by the ancient Egyptians provide valuable insights into their culture, religion, social structure, art, and technology. There are various reasons why people illegally dig in Egypt, but most of them are driven by the desire to find valuable antiquities that can be sold on the black market. These antiquities are often stolen from archaeological sites or tombs and sold to collectors or dealers who are willing to pay large sums of money for them. Another reason is the lack of economic opportunities in certain areas of Egypt, particularly in rural areas where poverty is widespread. In such areas, people may turn to illegal digging as a way to make money, since the sale of antiquities can be a lucrative business. In some cases, political instability and conflict can also contribute to illegal digging. During times of unrest, security forces may be preoccupied with other issues, allowing looters to operate with relative impunity. Unfortunately, illegal digging in Egypt has a significant impact on the country's cultural heritage.